is I outlined over the past couple of weeks as I was thinking about even giving this talk, talking points, things that I want to hit on. Feel free to interrupt me. I will check in. Let me, in fact, do one little thing here. There we go. And I want to, there we go, perfect. Okay. Again, as I see you, but I can see if you ask a question in the text. That way it makes it so you guys can, you feel free to interrupt me. Don't worry. I will find my place. Structuring. Let's do some quick update. A bunch of people, like half a dozen people, contacted me and said 6 a.m. And I said, "Oh, you're on the West Coast." And of course, some of them are actual video game programmers. And I said, "You do realize this talk isn't about video game programming. I will do that talk. I will teach people how to make a video game way faster and fun. Separate talk. This talk is how to build a video game company very specifically. It's laser focused." And I said, "You guys aren't capable of running a video game company if you can't wake up at 6 a.m. That's not really going to happen." And so it itself becomes the test to it itself. So I wanted to mention that right up front. Background. I'm going to give you guys a very fast background of myself. I have no interest in doing a autobiography in any form. And in fact, even my books, I'm really trying to make the topics not about me. People would like that in some ways because I've done some interesting things and I'm constantly told this. I get it, but it doesn't have high value. To me, the highest value is writing a book that's actually going to help people. And same here, this we're about to discuss in a moment. I'm hoping that all this is useful to you. So background, and I'm just staying on just as close as I can to the video game stuff itself, because I've done a lot of things in my life and in parallel. But the one thing that is important to the whole conversation is it started with I had no thoughts about doing video games, zero. I had done games though. In fact, I'm one of the original artists for TSR. I did art for Gygax for a game you guys probably heard about, Dungeons and Dragons, back in the 70s. I was very fortunate. I ended up doing art for a lot of people because I was fast and it was easy for people to contact me back then. So games were of interest to me, and I did play like chess on the circuit. So I made money playing chess. I get games. I don't have a real interest in it though. It's not a love of mine. So having said that, I was working on a project for JPL, and I'd done a bunch of other stuff in my life, and this was the first time something went wrong. Like almost as a cliche, big white guy, West Coast, everything goes my way. Got it. Yeah, whatever cliches or stereotypes you want to throw at me, yeah, I probably fit those. On the spectrum, I can solve things. I was doing computers early on, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, got all that. But my love was like solving really complex problems. At the time, JPL was right down the street from me. I was living in Glendale and Burbank, and next city over is a place called Pasadena, and that's where JPL is. And a friend of mine had just sort of shown me something they were doing, and I said, "Hey, I can solve that problem." And what it was is they were trying to control in the future a robot that would be sent to the moon, but they had a latency problem. It's roughly a little under 3 seconds round trip to the moon. And I had an idea. Bottom line is I spent a lot of money and time on it, and it went badly. The project was canceled, and I've never really had that happen. Everything I've ever put my energy or time into, something comes of it. And I don't drink alcohol, so my drunken stupor was going to an arcade, a video game arcade with a friend of mine. And I was angry. I was actually rather pissed off because I'd really wasted a lot of time and money, and I had to figure out what to do with that. And we're sitting there playing some game, and it was called Tank. It was a 2-player tank game, really crappy done. And I'm bitching about it. I'm sitting there complaining about this game, and he just looks at me and says, "Why don't you do better?" And I'm staring at him in a mood, like this wasn't the time to be upsetting me. And I'm not terribly emotional normally, but this one, it kind of raised my emotions at that moment. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. What the hell? I got nothing else in my head right at this moment. And from that day forward, I started calling all of my friends. I had friends that had just started a company a few years before called Activision. They had split off from Atari. I knew the Atari guys, blah, blah, blah. I just said to them, hey, they had nothing to do with their world. I just knew them. And I said, hey, what are the numbers here? And one of the numbers they gave me was somebody knew the numbers from the coin op at the place I was in Glendale. And they were talking about the wheelbarrows of coins they would roll out to the bank every few days. And I didn't understand how much money it was all a joke to me. And so I got serious about it. And so what literally happened here was I took Tank And I said, what can I bring to the table? I did a bunch of research into, if this was a movie, there'd be a montage right this moment of me going to the library and flying up to the Bay Area and just meeting with people to get as much information and building a portfolio. That's how I approach problems. I go far too in. And I had a model. And I thought, oh, I'll make a multiplayer game over a modem. I understand that wasn't really being done back then. There may have been only a dozen or less modem-based games in the world at that moment. And I looked at those and I went, oh, they're horrible. They're all round-based. Like, you move and I move and you move. They're like we're talking 300 baud. And I thought, wait, I can fix that. I'll use the exact same code I built for JPL to fix this, which is I can create an illusion that you're playing a video game in real time, even though the communication protocol is very low. And I ran a little test and it worked. And then I started hiring some programmers. And keep in mind, at this moment, this is a question I always love to ask other people. No one ever answers honestly. I'm going to answer honestly for you. I was at that time making commercials and music videos. I was one of the original art directors for MTV. And I then went on to make music videos. And I made Jay Giles, Rick Springfield, Donna Summer, David, and Warren Zevon. I've worked with everybody. And I'm making a lot of money. I mean, I basically would walk out, come back that night, there's $1,000 in my pocket. It was a good time. This is back in the early 80s. So here I am looking at this, and I'll take a break in just a second, just so you guys know and read everything and catch up. But I just want you guys to know this one sort of philosophy. So I'm trying to hire people, and what's weird is I'm starting to just hire people, and this is to me a hobby, and I'm paying them by going out and working. And I continued to do that for about 3 years. I would continue getting calls on a commercial or something. I'd zoom out, do some work, get some money, pay my team. And I would make roughly 10 times what everybody else was making. So this was actually really easy for me. And it's kind of a point I want to make. It's like my first point I want to make to anybody who wants to get into video games. You better have a source of money. You might be able to show me some sort of exception to that rule somewhere. You'll show me somebody who made a video game that was successful. Great. How many of those are there? Almost zero. If you have some examples, because I'd actually be kind of curious about them and see how they actually made it. But there are a few. There's like I said, I personally could probably come up with at least one a year. Those are very bad numbers. There are tens of thousands of games back then were being made every year. Most don't make it. So with that in mind, I was doing the two things at the same time, but I could do the important part of the coding. That part was easy for me. And then I had smarter people than myself that I hired. That's the next thing. If you can't find people that are better at things than you are, you're probably not going to succeed. That's just, again, I'm not speaking about me. See, a lot of these things are like, oh, yeah, well, that was your own experience. No, that's about 300 other dev houses that have worked with me. I've helped them over the years. I've helped a lot of other video game companies become successful. I've been on the board of advisors to tons of companies, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I'm not even telling the story about myself. I'm telling that's the landscape. And I got a game out the door. And that first game, it sold really well. And we did a lot of original things. And so here we have a video game. And I invented the first real-time arcade video game. So you played real-time on a 300 baud modem across the planet with a joystick and we'll be able to type. So in other words, I built the first multimedia game as well. And that game was called Firepower. It was on the Amiga, and I think we released it in 87. So you realize how early on this stuff is. And then the next thing happens. And I've learned this across the board. It happens so much in video games, it's almost incomprehensible. It's something that it does not get talked about a lot. Endless lawsuits. The video game industry is endless lawsuits. If you can't handle that, don't touch video games. There's a very good chance you'll have some type of lawsuit. It could be copyright related. It could be anything. One of your employees getting pissed off. It's just trigger happy when it comes to that. And back then, that was even an odd experience for me as well. So I'm going to stop there for a second because that's kind of the origin story, meaning I didn't have a problem with lawsuits. And it's going to set a lot of what I tell you in just a moment. So give me a second to just read off on the right side, make sure I'm not missing anything. Hold on. Yep, good. I don't have anybody helping me at this level. So did you write Halt and Catch Fire? No, I didn't do Halt and Catch Fire, but I am aware of it. Very well done. And I know that team, Run and Gun, I think was the name of it. Was Mutiny Games, right? But it was Run and Gun was one of the other groups, and they did a game very similar to that as well, 3DO. Flappy Birds, yeah, building from the ground up, yep. You're asking actually a really good question. Somebody asked here, Brenda asks, how do you manage time between making money and setting up this new game company? I am not talented. I'm stating this as a fact. I'm not making a joke. I'm not being humble. I don't even have the ability to be humble. If I sound arrogant, I'm stating a fact. And if I sound humble, I'm stating a fact. I'm just telling you something. I am not talented. I have a few skills, hard work, not even a question. And I do have some superpowers, not terribly useful, but being on the spectrum, being hypersensitive to sound and noise and touch and everything else, it causes me to approach certain things differently. And sometimes there are advantages to it. I notice things. I have very good pattern recognition. In a game like Set, which is a card game, you're probably not going to win against me. So it's like I'm like a cat biting a ball. I'm like, it's instant. I don't even have to think. I see things. Same with chess. I see the patterns. So, but I don't make money off that very well. That's not a great place to make money, as it turns out. Maybe poker is better. So my answer to that is, where I was making money was so easy for me. And I'll tell you how much I gamed it. This is me gaming something. I also bring up the topic of game theory. This is worth mentioning because, again, you'll need to apply this to video games because you need every trick in the book if you're going to make a video game. Every trick in the book. So go back a few years. I was probably making the video for Sting. It was, I can't remember what even the song was, but we had a lot of candles. I remember having to gather a lot of candles. Anyways, there was some shoot we were doing there. It was a place called Raleigh Studios in Hollywood. And I'm on the set, and I'm already known as kind of a bit of a whiz kid, but I show up on time. I'm always there before everybody else. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I've never even had coffee. I'm this way all the time. You're seeing me. I drink water all day. I'm always this hyper. I'm there in the morning. I'm there at like 5:30 a.m. And the director and one of the set designers needed something. I think it was like a gel, meaning a color thing for a light. And I heard them talking, and I said, I can have that here in 20 minutes. Now, understand, cell phones didn't exist. And they know where the gels come from, which is far away. And they're like, oh, really? And so they kind of challenged me, like, we want to see this happen. And I beeline it to a telephone that's sitting on the wall. I make a call. Less than 20 minutes later, gel appears. Their jaws drop. I wish they'd bet me. They didn't. What actually happened was I made so much money doing what I was doing. What I would do is I would hire kids. Funny enough, at that time in my life, they were only a few years younger than me, as long as they had a license and a car. And I would pay them for the entire time we'd probably be working, which was usually from 6 in the morning till probably about 2 in the afternoon. That's about as far as it ever went. And I would pay them. And if they needed to come, I would give them a massive bonus. And I placed one on the east side and one on the west side of Los Angeles. And I already explained what was probably going to happen. They're going to grab something and bring it to the studio. I already would call the front desk. I would tell them where they were, so their names were already on the list, and in they'd come. That right there, I can tell you that philosophy of story 50 times in making video games per game. Something like that. It's sitting down and being aware of what's going to happen next, comprehending it, and then carrying it through, even if it never happens. Being ready, being a magician. I use the word magic often. This is what I mean by magic. Magic is when everybody else doesn't know what's going on, but you do. That's really what magic is. Okay, so give me a second to do a quick check over here. I hope that answered your question, but the reason basically what I was saying to you is I actually did very little work. Even when I was on the sets, you often just sit around, and as long as you don't make any noise and you're ready to step in, there's nothing to do. And most of what I did was props and set design, stuff like that, or I worked for other people doing it. And as long as they could yell at me and make me come in, I could do whatever else I wanted. So I often worked wherever I was. Oh, and I should mention, this is probably worth mentioning, my father was one of the designers of the first cell phone. Even back then, I didn't have a cell phone, but I had a device that let me make a phone call. You wouldn't have called it a cell phone because it didn't hook up to two different towers, but it was a radio that had a specific line. And I use that again to do magic tricks. So it's for conversation for a different day. And one day I'll pull all the hardware out and show it to everybody and make a video about it. Okay, going down. Jacked, awesome game, amazing. Yes, great story behind it. Sting video with candles, wrapped around your finger. Yes, that was it. I don't. Oh, you just guys don't know. Making a music video is one of the most horrible things in the entire world because they take a song and they play it on loop, nonstop, while you're shooting all day long. Even the people who write the songs can't handle it at the end of the day. You all go insane. Everyone goes insane making a music video. Just a small little piece of information. Okay. Allowed you to delegate things. So, yep. Yeah. Also, it should be mentioned, I'm always, even back then when I was younger, I invented a lot of things and those created income streams. And there was a guy, Andrew Warner, he's on LinkedIn. I haven't talked to him in years. He interviewed me at some point and he was interviewing all these wealthy guys. And he interviewed me and said, like, when did you make your first million? And I said, I didn't. And who's telling you they made a first million? And he goes, oh, everyone tells me that. And I went, then they're lying to you. I've almost met zero people who made $1 million. I will tell you that I made 3 different products. And one day I realized I was sitting on $1 million in my bank account. But the chance of one product making $1 million, especially back in the 80s, cocaine's involved. So I'm going to say it's so rare that you'll only know the story of somebody because it's that rare. See, that's another thing about the web. People talk about the thing that's so extraordinary and it almost never happens. Yeah, for me, when I reached that, a lot of things were happening at the same time. And I would not have known that any one of them would succeed. In fact, it's all random at that level. Okay. Let me just do a quick reinvestigate critical importance. Yes, I agree. Okay. So top down, I've got a list here. I'm going to check my time. We're good. Okay. I'm going to make a statement. Almost no video game makes money. That statement is true. I can also make the statement that 0% of people on this planet have died of COVID. You think I just made a political statement. I did not. I am not saying people did not die of COVID. I just simply am telling you as a mathematician, 0% if we're going to stop it at that point. If you want to go 0.01%, lots of people died. Okay, almost no people make money in video games. I know you can show me examples of people who did. A lot of reasons for that, still a very small number. You're up against bad odds. There are so many better things to put your time and energy into. I am a little biased against making video games. It doesn't mean I don't like any video games. There's, in fact, a lot of them out there are amazing. I think that I just want to blank on the name of it. The one with the made up of all the blocks, probably the biggest game out there now. Mineshaft. What's it called? One of you guys will know. I played it like once. I looked at it and went, that's awesome. I love that they did that. Angry Birds Physics, loved that. I love some of these things out there. Not the point. The games I love the most did not sell well. But, oh, and I should mention this. That's another thing you see on the web a lot. A lot of this conversation is me just looking at all the stuff I see on LinkedIn and Twitter and all these other things, Bluebird or whatever it's called now, Blue Sky. And I look at that and I think, wow, you found the one example. I'll just mention this. There is a concept in the music business such as a musician's musician. Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys is a musician's musician. That means he's a musician, but musicians appreciate him even more than the masses. There's very few crossovers, very few musicians who are so good that other musicians go, like Prince. Prince is a great example. The populace loves him, but other musicians adore him. That list is a small list. There's a lot of great musicians, Johnny Cash, funny musician. A lot of musicians out there are like, yeah, okay, but it's pretty obvious what you do for a living. Like we can mimic what you do. You just have a great voice. They have some, especially Minecraft, that was it. So I'm just telling you, there are video gamers. There are that same sort of construct of, there are games that are awesome and they make no money. There are games you look at and go, oh my God, why is that making money? And it makes money. And sometimes you get the two. Mario Kart 64 is one of the best games ever made in history. I built a game back in the old days. I commented to the company when they said, hey, go make this game. I said, the plot of this game is the best plot for a video game ever. Just a statement I made. I said, we're not even going to do this justice. We'll probably do a shitty job. You're only giving us a few months to do it. And to this day, how many games can you name? I will tell you what the movie was in a second. We were making I did a lot of movies to video games. In fact, I was one of the few that made money off of all that. Most people failed, and I'll tell you why they failed in a moment. That's part of what we're going to explain in a second. But this game was Die Hard. And I read the script, and I looked at the game, and I went, as a game, like we talked about, it was all obvious to us. The game has to have a scene where he walks over glass, and then, and you have a timer and a countdown, and you've got these bad guys, and right, that's the perfect formula for a video game. And it's geared towards men, boys, and first person shooter, and blah blah blah. Great. I'm just telling you, you could remake that one plot, not story, that one plot, 50 different ways, and they would all make money as a plot because they speak to people. I didn't write this down in my notes. I want to mention it right this second before I forget. There's a word we would not use back in the 80s and 90s, and it's still true today. And it's still true that people don't like to use this word. And the word is addiction. I just want you guys to know that inside the business, we use that word a lot. We use it carefully, and sometimes we use code words for it, like thumb. That used to be one of our codes. In fact, a great compliment you could give to another game designer was, you give great thumb. It means your video games are so liked that you hurt yourself playing it on a joystick. You give great thumb. So I would often get told, oh, you give great thumb, right? Cool. It sounds kind of disgusting, but yeah, that's what it is. And we're speaking to the addictive power of it, that you are so in it, you will physically hurt yourself trying to play that stupid game. We focused on that. I will tell you that much of the stuff I see on the death scrolling and a lot of these websites are using video game philosophies, even if the designers didn't realize it. You can see the influences they're using and how they're tracking things. So just want to mention that, an important one. Okay, so working through this, if you think you have a great idea, I'm going to start getting into in a moment literally how to build the company. I'm focusing on the company as opposed to the games themselves here. I'm trying to mention things that they sound like I'm talking about the video game, but I'm telling you about the problems of the business itself. And that's a tricky aspect of the whole thing. A game that fails on one platform might be a smash hit on another platform. That's another problem in the business. That alone, we could just talk about that for hours. We could talk about releasing a video game on two what appears to be almost identical machines, a Sony and an Xbox, and they look and appear, and yet no, for some reason over here, there's an old commercial. Remember, I'm old in this conversation. There's an old commercial, I think it was for like FedEx, and some nerdy guy is at the table with all the executives, and he comes up with an idea, and he says, hey, maybe what we could do is we could switch to FedEx, blah, blah, blah. And then the CEO goes, wait, I have a great idea. We could switch to FedEx and blah, blah, blah. And he says the exact same thing. And then the geeky guy goes, I just said that. And everyone at the table goes, no, you didn't. And then the CEO guy goes, no, you went like this, and I went like this. That right there was funny because it's so true. Oh my God, just how one button you changed accidentally and an entire video game fails. When I realized that, and I realized it early on, it changed the way I made video games. Again, I'm not talking about the video game. I'm talking about how I made the company move forward. It changed my philosophy, and I will give you an example. Companies usually come to us. When I say companies, I'm talking Disney, Paramount, Electronic Arts, Activision, all the big ones. We bailed a lot of companies out when they had bad problems. Also non-video game companies. I'm focused on video games here, but my team, we got versions of Windows out the door. We took their source code, we found all their bugs, we gave it back to them and fixed. They paid us. They threw lots of money into my bank account. So here's an example where a company came to us. They had months to get something out the door. I said to them, how long do we actually have? They said, well, the movie's coming out on this date. And I said, if you miss that date, so this is a lesson for everybody here who ever does a branded product. If you are going to miss that date, and you probably will, give up. I have no examples of branded products coming out late. You get to be there when the movie's out and the advertising engine is already in place. The only thing that's changed since 20 years ago and 15 years ago is the advertising engine, the marketing people are in with the video games early on. But in my day, they were not. I was the one who said, you better have that game on the shelf at the exact same moment the first person walks in that theater, if not before. So I would often have to build games when everybody else was building them in 18 months, fastest a year. We built games in 90 days. And they brought me a game. Day one, new movie. Happened to be that I knew the team behind the video, behind the movie, sorry, behind the movie. I knew the team who built the engine for it, the software to build the movie, which was a movie called Shrek. And so I knew everybody. I'm like, okay, I've already got all the designs. I can literally walk down the street. I just pick up the designs, come back over. I can call on their artists. In fact, I can go hire their artists if I want to. And I did that often. I was one of the first companies ever to hire Disney artists and make them make Disney games. And so that's another trick. It's like, wait, why don't I just go call them? They're probably out of work. So they finished the movie. What are they doing now? So the Shrek game, I made a simple statement to them. And it came, I'm going to tell the story backwards real fast. It's now, I think, 8 months later. We built the game and went out the door. 8 months later, the head of the company that owned the company that I'm talking about here was a company called TDK. They used to make audio tapes. He's from Japan. He comes with his assistant. They flew in just to meet with me. They sit down. They know nothing about me or my company per se. They wanted to talk to me. They were very upset. So my CEO and myself are sitting there in our conference room, and he begins to talk. And he and his partner guy are talking with each other. One thing they don't know is I used to live in Japan. I can read and write Japanese. So you understand the level of my understanding here. And so I already know what they're saying. In fact, I even took a break for a moment and had to talk to my CEO to explain what was really going on here. And the CEO starts to berate me that I did not build them a game that got them good reviews. In fact, I will tell everyone here, it got some of the worst reviews ever. Like if there was a Razzie or a Raspberry in the video game business back then, we would have gotten one. And I would have gone and picked that puppy up. Just like Sandra Bullock did that apparently. She won an award for a movie and she also got a Razzie. I love that she went and picked it up. I would do the same thing. Because here's what I told him. And because I knew his numbers more than he realized. First, my CEO talked, and he's a finance guy and a lawyer. And he calmly looks at them and says, well, you guys made 22 products in the past year, and only one of them made money, ours. And in fact, it made so much money, it paid for the other 21. And this look on his face just went stone. And we said, it is a shame. You will not see that happen again from us. And we literally pointed him at the door and asked him to leave. Now, he left. I ended up talking later to the president of the sub company that they owned. And he was very sad. He was like, can we fix this? And I said, yes and no. I mean, I'd work with you again. You're all good people. I think he was an idiot. I know their culture. I know what he's going for. What he didn't realize is I'd literally written them a game theory plan ahead of time, telling them how we were going to build a game in 90 days and make it successful. I don't know if you guys know the numbers of this type of thing, but this game went out the door on the Game Boy and sold through in the first month 250,000 units. This is serious money. These games were selling for $40 back then. We all did very well. That was just the first month and the second month and the third month. And why? Because I built the game for its audience. And this is something I learned early on. And so this is my best lesson to everyone here. Make sure the game is at least fun for your audience. They always leave that part off. The reason we got nothing but bad reviews is because every single one of those reviews were written by a 35-year-old male, probably living in his mother's basement. That actually isn't a joke. We actually confirmed a few of them really did. And they hated the game because it wasn't written for them. It was written for 7 to 12-year-olds. And we had been testing nonstop with 7 to 12-year-olds in our own office. We did not test for 35-year-olds. Know your market. I'm a big tester. I test everything. I used to run the tests at Mattel on children's products, and I would warn them. We built a product for Mattel once, and I told them, do not let the children play my game. It's addicting. You won't get anything else out of the kids because they want to test the kids with multiple toys throughout the day. They will be done. And they thought I was joking. They thought I was being arrogant. And I said to them, I said, this is not a joke. I'm serious. Don't let the kids play other games. The game I built for them You took the vehicle in real-time 3D. You used your mouse like a Hot Wheels vehicle, it would be, like you actually imagine it being a car. So when you move the mouse, the car and the screen move back and forth, and you threw it forward and tried to destroy as much as you can. And we made the world cartoonish, but we made the explosions realistic. And it's an incredible high to blow things up. And you put a 7 to 12-year-old kid with a joystick or a mouse, and they're able to blow stuff up, the kids would fall to the ground screaming if you tried to take the joystick out of their hands. Screaming. And that was it. They were not going to look at any other toy. They wanted our toy. And of course, we knew we had a hit on our hands. And yeah, a game like that blew out immediately 500,000 units. I don't build things that are small. I built things that were big. The Los Angeles Times wrote up our stupid video game for 7 to 12-year-olds. And somebody realized it's a great drinking game, and that only caused the sales to even grow higher. So suddenly we did have the 35 market. We didn't go after them. That was an accident. I had nothing to do with it, nor did anybody else. It just turned into a drinking game. May that only happen to you. Oh, and let me throw this out at you. When I built that first game, that tank game, it was banned, and I knew this was going to happen. We had a choice of making the blood black or red. This is a very big thing in the video game world, as you guys know. Religious symbols and blood color, very important. Nintendo actually has rules about this. No red blood. I said, nope, screw it. I want red. It's going to be red. I'm one of those people that, like, if I want it my way, I'm going to get it my way. It got banned in Germany. 4 times the sales in Germany because of that. Magic. Czech Republic, Polska, Poland, France, all of them, their sales went up. Also, because they would buy them there and because they got excited about it, knowing that the Germans wanted the game. That's what happens. This happens often. So I'm stating all of this, you guys, to understand that these little stories, you'll see there's a constant, I can just constantly tell you stories like this, but you'll also realize this is luck. Sure, I built some of these things. Sure, I asked certain things. But realize how many of these types of stories I'm throwing out at you so fast. And as I think, I'll just tell you more and more. Like, well, this happened because I just happened to be there the same day the director was there, or the same day that the artist was there. It's luck. You fight for that. And that used to scare me back then constantly. Okay, I'm going back to my list here. You wrote, what did I make red? The blood of, in our game, you could run over soldiers and they would make this ridiculous sound. In fact, the sound that they made, I'm going to reproduce this as best I can, sounded like this. And we had full audio. We could have done anything we wanted. It was just this weird sound, like, it was horrible. What it was the program. I said to the program, I just throw some sound in there, and he just picked up a microphone and went, and it just made us laugh every time we heard it, so we kept it. If you have a bunch of people laughing in the room, keep it. As long as you're not laughing at yourselves in the sense that you think you're ridiculous, be careful of that. Check that with other people. But if you have an involuntary positive reaction to something, oh, baby, keep that in there. That was our realization. I was like, we're keeping the sound and we're keeping it red. When you made it black, it looked like an oil stain. Nope, it has to be red. You have to know you killed a Nazi. That's the deal. So that's a great example of that. Yeah, GTA, I could actually spend 3 hours talking about GTA. When it first came out, I was going to mention this one small thing. That actually is one of the games that caused me to walk away from the business. I appreciate it, and it's definitely a moneymaker, but I realize I'm doing the wrong thing with my time. I shouldn't be making video games. I'm not judging at this level. I'm just simply saying, for me, I realize I could be using my time in a way better way. I've also won a lot of awards on sound. I'm the first person to do real 3D Dolby surround sound in video games, blah, blah, blah. I've done a lot of stuff first because I did it first. I made the phone calls first. That is something I will tell you. You better be ballsy. I don't have a better word for that in every language. You better have strength to not give up. Again, kind of luck, but most things I ended up, any story I tell you where there's a positive, there's a bunch of negatives that went around it and a lot of fighting that happened for it. Great video games are sculpted from blood. That's what I've noticed mostly. There's some exceptions. And in fact, I also have noticed, I've seen this happen, some of the people who've built some of the greatest games won't tell you how horrible it was. I was there watching it happen. I'm like, you were like going through a divorce and your company was about to go out of business. Like, yeah, but they want to be all positive. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't. So you're kind of lying to the world. It's hard. Next item. Let me check my list here for a second. The platform companies are a-holes. Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. Fundamentally, they're working against you. And economically, they're going to have one hit out of 100, out of 1,000. It could be worse than that nowadays. I looked up some of the numbers. I should tell you, I did some research on this just for the recent numbers. I didn't see anything different from the old days. The way it's done is a little bit different. Yeah, right now, 50% of games are free, effectively. Many, they're ad driven and so forth, and on cell phones. But cell phones were happening back then as well. I have a friend who's at Mattel. He made that bowling game, and it sold like 350,000 units in the first week. It went, and it was all done just from the touchpad. You can make games for cell phones and do well, but remember, you only have the real estate of the cell phone itself to convince you. You can do, in fact, I should mention that too. For the most part, shy of any campaign you can run privately, the real estate of a video game is controlled by the platform, like Apple or iPhone, or it's controlled by the screen's real estate. If you've got room for 5 sentences each video game, that's it. You don't win. Someone has to know to look for you. Word of mouth is your next thing. That's grassroots. Hey, everyone here already knows what a grassroots movement is. If you don't, you're silly. You shouldn't even be in the business. And you might make it work, but it's a hard game to play. So just be aware of that. I'm pushing, as you can tell in the way I'm speaking, for people not to make video games in a sense. I'll also say if you have a great vision for something, do it. Go make it happen. You could be the winner. I'm not saying you can't. Just be very realistic about all this stuff. And I hope to give you guys some ideas to make that happen in a second. I'll go more positive in just a moment. So in a second, I'll take a break just before I go into that, and I'll read all the messages over here. So failing on one platform, succeeding on another. I will tell you again a trick that I use. Now, this part, this is me. This is one of the few places where I'm good at something. I am a very bad programmer. Let's start with that. I am not a good programmer. I'm very good at programming logic. So programmers like to work with me because I can teach them a logic faster, and they can do a better job than I can. It's almost like they may not know what to paint, but they'll be a better painter than me. I used to paint for a living. Again, there was always a better painter than me. But my topics, that's how I sold. Here's what I did with video games. This is 1980 something, 88, maybe 89. And I realized, wait, I'll just write my own compiler, and I'll build a compiler that puts the exact same game on every platform at the exact same moment. I didn't know that would be hard, and it wasn't for me. Apparently, it's been very hard for everybody else. I still don't understand why that is, but I built a thing, a programming language. I called it MIDAS, Machine Independent Demonstration Animation System, not a backronym. I actually thought it was being called MIDAS immediately. It makes gold files. I'm an AI guy, so I was already writing high-level language that then generated low-level language. I would tell it intention, it would generate assembly language. And I realized as a mathematician, go for the lowest common denominator first. Make this thing work on the worst computer for programming. That'd be the Commodore 64. Even the Apple is nicer to program for. 64 looks better. It has more tools and toys, but it's actually harder to program for because you have to know all that. I could write a program, start up the program, starting screen, picking screen, 1 player, 2 player, 3 player, jump into basic games, a win and a lose situation, go to the end, ending sequences, winning, losing, leaderboard 1 player, leaderboard 2 player. What I just spewed out that fast, every single video game that was multiplayer back then had to do. It would take a week to 2 weeks for it to get the basic structure. I could do it in minutes. And I could press a button, and it would be playing in real time on a C64, Apple, Macintosh, PC, Amiga, ST, all these different computers instantly. And I had them physically wired. I'm also a hardware guy. So I physically would wire all these up, press a button, bam. And that meant that whichever one of those machines could be done first, you win. And back then, again, this is an economic move to be aware of. When you're building a game today, if I was going to build a game, you better pick a platform that works on iPhone and Android at the same time. Otherwise, you're going to need 2 programmers, and that's way more expensive. So keep that in mind. One of the tricks, which I would use right this second just as well, and I'll give you an answer, start with figuring out why you won't use Flutter. I'm not saying you're going to use Flutter. I'm not telling you not to use Flutter. First, just make sure, why are you not using Flutter? Make sure you're right. I actually believe Flutter is probably your best answer today for making a lot of video games if you're trying to make a game on multiple platforms at the same time. And you'll also get out of that a web version, a Windows version, a Mac version, a Linux version. So why not? Build your game to the platform, make sure it works. So with that in mind, At a time in history, like if it's the late 80s, early 90s, the way most games were made is you made the game well enough, the publishing companies would step in and look at it. They would go, oh, yeah, we want you to make it for this other platform. And you'd have to go spend all the money to make it a game. If you already had done that, they'll just give you that money. And so I had companies just handing me $50,000 checks because they're like, wait, you can do the other platform and the other platform and the other platform? Yes, because I built my own programming language. Again, a trick. I don't know how a lot of companies were able to survive and do stuff without that. The games have to be very simple. One of the best simple games ever, which is also one of the best selling games, is Tetris. You should be able to write Tetris as a good programmer in 1990 in about 1 week complete. And that's still a long time. You really think about what the game can do and can't do. Why did it take a day? Because programming tools suck. That's why. Now, give me a second. Let me read quickly through the notes here. And let me kill that. Yes, good. Yes, Ride of the Valkyries. Somebody mentioned your Ride of the Valkyries. I'm going to mention something real fast. I cut the first deal ever in history with EMI, Angel EMI. They wanted, I think, close to, I'm doing this from memory now, it was between $150,000 and $250,000 because I wanted more than 40 minutes worth of music, and they heard it as a music deal. They're like, you want to take a CD of ours with the best music recorded from the best orchestras in the world and buy a license to it? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, by the time I was done, incredibly long story made short, I called the attorney. I'm good with attorneys. I'm talking to the attorney. Hey, do you have a kid? Yeah. How old? 14. Give me your address. I mailed him a platform, a game machine, 3DO, and the most recent version of our game. And I mailed it to him. And in the mailing, I told the kid to call me. Kid calls me. I said, tell your father what music would mean to this game for you. And he did. And he called me back and he goes, okay, you've got my kid completely hyped out on your game. What are we talking about? And you'd think that would raise the price. No, what I explained to him is I said, how about I just share our economics with you and you tell me what's a reasonable concept? I can tell you today because he's dead. That deal ended up being $13,000. I paid $13,000 to the rights to orchestra-made music at that level. I listened to in the back of my truck. I got 300 or 400. There was, I think, it was called Laser Light. I think was the name of the company that made a bunch of crappy music, orchestra music. I was ready, just so you guys know. This gives you an example of a whole universe I didn't go down, but I was about to. I wanted those songs to be perfect. I wanted them to be perfect orchestrated songs. Ride of the Valkyries, In the Hall of the Mountain King. I am a music aficionado. I love high quality and I love classical music. And they had to be the rock and roll versions from that era. It had to be Mozart's versions. Mozart was a rocker. I wanted his version. I wanted his tempo. And some of them were like, dun, 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 dun. No, I want, and so I would listen to 20, 30 versions over a 1 month period in the back of my truck with 2 boxes, good, bad. And I would eventually just keep cycling until I ended up with the best versions. And it turned out 8 out of the 10 songs I picked, Angel EMI had made them. I had to cut the deal with them. But I was ready with one more thing. I'm from the Baltics. And actually, really great orchestras are dime a dozen there. And so I did I was already in parallel calculating myself flying back to the Baltics. I was going to go to probably Lithuania, hire an entire orchestra for like a week, and I was going to conduct it myself. This sounds like ego. No, I needed it to be right. I probably would have actually grabbed one of their conductors and taught him what I'm trying to do, and we would have worked together. And all of that would have actually cost less than the $13,000. Time was the reason I ended up with EMI. They almost lost that because I was actually looking at just doing the whole thing myself. But I knew that the music is what was going to make it win, which is not for a video game, not what most people would think about. It just had to be perfect. So coming back, let me take a look through this. Someone said, oh, you're asking a question here, Michael. What are the community level beliefs that you can harness intersubjective beliefs of the community? You're one of those people who talks with big words. Don't worry, I do too. I'm just thinking it's funny, especially if you can subvert community norms towards your aim. That's really tricky. Today, this probably matters a lot more than it did when we didn't have a community. This could turn into a huge tangent, so I'm not going to go very far into this, but I'm just going to say this. I'm going to use a completely weird analogy. I also used to write comedy for many comedians you guys know. In fact, my running joke is this is a joke for comedians. This is not a joke I would ever tell publicly, but my joke is, yes, I do write for stand up, and what I don't sell to stand up, I sell to Letterman, and what I don't sell to Letterman, I sell for twice the price to Leno. Now, to comedians, they appreciate the subtlety of that joke. I can't even imagine being a comedian today. Can you imagine trying to go out to colleges, no matter what you're saying, even if you just had the most bland humor, somebody in the audience will make you out to be a child pedophile, rapist, blah, 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 whatever. You're screwed. 20, 30, 40 comedians will not go near colleges anymore. And it's taken all the fun out of it. Okay, my answer is kind of the same to your question here. Video games are so stratifying, they're so layering and forcing apart. I don't even know what you would do there. And although I don't agree with this person I'm about to speak of, but I actually appreciate him deeply, is Guy Kawasaki. He was the head of marketing for Apple, and he was the first evangelist. And he's brilliant in what he says there. And I've read every single book he's read, not because I agree with everything he's saying. I just think he has a really great way of writing stuff and saying stuff. So even when I disagree with him, I like what he's saying and the way he says it, because it needs to be said, even if you disagree with something. But at this point he made, and it stuck with me when he first said it 2 decades ago. And he said, that first group that buys your product, if you can get rid of them, do it. And imagine, he's talking about the original Apple people that picked up on the Mac. They were a nightmare for Apple. They did 2 things. It was like having a motorcycle gang as your first, users. They would beat up anybody who came near their product and said something bad about it. And they beat each other up and stop other people from buying the product. And so he couldn't get rid of the user groups that had Macs, and the way they would talk about it, they were the very people who were loving the machine were actually destroying the market. So with that being said, community, all I can tell you there is you better find some human. I can't do this, and no one I've ever hired would be able to do this, I don't think, because I'm not a marketing salesperson. But everything I've ever done, I've done it without that. You better have the nicest person in the world, so nice, so wonderful. There's a young lady who is in charge, and I'm going to word her that way. I'm going to talk like an old man here. Remember, I'm 64. In fact, in a few months I turn 65. There's a young lady who is doing the marketing for Blue Sky, and she's awesome. I watch her; she's pure awesome. And you kind of would feel bad saying something bad to her. She just has pure charisma. If you can find a human like that, yeah, give them lots of money, let them go talk to your community. That would be my answer. You'd have to get lucky. There's very few people like that. Pulling off marketing at that level in a community, I don't know how you moderate that. I don't know how you keep it from going off the rails and destroying you at some point. It's just too tough. Okay, Pokemon Go, yep, I agree. Do you think that the same principles that applied your days are still applicable? Absolutely. Not just do I think the same. As I said, I went, before I talked about all this stuff, I went and researched, and I called friends of mine. Keep in mind, my friends owned all the big companies you guys all remember growing up with. And we've talked about all this stuff. I went and visited Trip Hawkins. He lives up in Santa Barbara. And I called him because I want him to write the part of my book for himself in his own words. Because when he and I do business together, we had a lot of fun together, did some interesting things. And here's a guy who literally created electronic arts. He knows the stuff inside out. And we would hit on some of these topics, and like, you could see the look on both our faces. We mentioned something, and both of us sort of roll our eyes and, oh my God, I can't imagine doing that today. But not because things have changed or it's that much worse. We're just not young. I couldn't put up with all this crap today. But has the market changed? Has the philosophy changed? Are the users that much different? No. At the end of the day, I don't see any differences. No one's identified anything to me, at least. I'll say it that way. If you come up with something, tell me, but I'm not aware of it. It's the same problem, just packaged with a different color. That's it. That's all I see. Okay. Got it. Okay. Someone jumped out. Good. Yep. Give me just one second to read real quick here. Yes. Okay. Just make sure the answer has an actual question mark on it. Good. Now, I've got 3 last topics: money, legal, and negotiating. Hopefully this is useful. Hopefully it's useful outside of video games as well, but this is really important here. This is a little more positive, but it will tell you what you need to work on here. As we go into this, I'll give you the last few negative things I've got. If you're going to build a video game, which you're probably not going to do alone, you might be able to do it today, maybe with AI and all that. It's physically possible. I'm not denying that. But you'd have to know a lot of little tricks before you do that. It can be done. but you really have to know what you're doing. I have to give you guys this example. I don't know the person's name. He's a musician. He may have been one of the Oingo Boingo guys, but he did a whole musical album using that toddler toy that you has wheels and you pull it and it looks like a xylophone and you just bang it. And he made good music come out of that crappy device. It was one of the most impressive things I've ever heard. It's just him going ding, 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 but it's good. And that's what makes it unique. I have the CD somewhere, worth listening to. My point is, you're probably not going to do this alone. You're probably not going to be able to have that much talent that you could take that piece of crap and make it work. But you can make AI do some amazing things right now. But with the team you work with, everyone better be on board for the fact that at the end of the making of a video game, the odds are you've been so busy making the video game, you didn't line up the next thing. You're not going to know if your video game is actually a success for a minimum of 2 months to 3 months later. You're not going to know all the economics. You're not going to know about the lawsuits. You're not going to know what's really going on. Like, I'm a big fan of buying used cars just for the fact that if it has good history, I mean, you have all the paperwork for it, the odds are you actually end up with a better car as a used car because they've already worked out all the problems. The hard data on that's very good. Same thing here. You got to be lining up the future. You need to be thinking in terms of what can already be worked out for the next thing. So somewhere around the halfway point in making a video game, you better be lining up the next video game, the next bout of money. Whether if the game is a success, you may have to fire everybody. If the game is a failure, you may have to fire everybody. And for completely different reasons. And I can walk you down all those paths. But if the game is a success, here's the weirdest thing that happens constantly. Another company steps in, they start giving you more money, and a price to be paid is they want to hand pick because they think they're going to end up with something better by firing a lot of your original team that they just don't like. This happens constantly. Today, in the past, I've checked with people. So keep that in mind. You won't know all of this until months in. So you're always in a weird situation. So the very best thing, the best advice I can tell you is if right this moment, I said it to you at the beginning of this, you want to make a video game, make sure you have money. You have another source, another business. You're making something else at the same time. That's the best formula that I know of for success. Not whether it's a good game, not whether you have great marketing. That one right there is so important. Cut your costs, live at home. All those things give you every little advantage. And you will, if you don't know this word, sabermetrics. There's a movie, Moneyball. Watch the movie Moneyball. It's kind of a true story. It's not quite accurate, but it's very close. Philosophically, it's very accurate. The story itself is bad. So the plot's real, stories were not. That is the story of how to make a video game. The story is do each one specific thing as well as you possibly can, and statistically, you might win. That's the story it tells. But it's a true story too. Like the plot of it's correct. Okay. If your new game is not already in process, meaning the next game you're making, you're closing shop. You can't survive it. Too many things happen. Life happens. People need to go on and do other things. You'll lose people just through attrition, etc. Just keep up. That's the last of my negative stuff. Everything I'm going to say now going forward is hopefully somewhat positive by just warning you about it. So I'm not saying these are bad things. I'm just saying be prepared. When you make a video game, you better know what everything costs. So talk to everybody. People will tell you things like, well, the packaging is going to cost you $20,000. And then when you go to do it, it's $30,000. Why? Well, because there's a lot of things people don't remember. And I ask a lot of questions. When I say that, I don't mean like even like a reporter does, or even most scientists. I track things over 30, 40, and 50 years. I ask questions of people cognitively. That's my real interest, is cognitive science. So I ask questions that are sometimes really weird. I mentioned hundreds of women about that one book. I have asked, probably not hundreds, I've probably asked 50, I'll say 4 to 5 dozen men what the gas mileage is in their truck. And almost none of them can answer that beyond what a chimp would answer. Like, they really just don't understand anything. I'm stunned. I'm like, wait, you just told me the size of your gas tank. You didn't even tell me what the thing gets. Well, I don't know. I just fill it up at the end of every day. They're ADHD. They don't think that way. But it tells me what they're thinking. I'm just telling you, don't trust anybody when it comes to dollars and numbers. And any spreadsheet you can get your hands on, that's the magic. Get the real spreadsheet to real products at the end of the project, not the beginning. If you can find any finance people, I'm a big fan of going this way to get data. There's most people are saying, well, I'll just go ask the CFO. No, ask the IRS agent who audited them. That's a better person if you can get to them. My point is, the person you ask for data often isn't the person you think you should ask for data because you're trying to get the truth. When I wanted to know the truth of how many people were dying from COVID, I called morticians. There's somebody on this call right now who was there when I was doing this. I started calling morticians, Texas, New York, China. I would call them and go, have you hired more people? Have you buried more people? That's how I get data. I just want to know the truth. And I could actually weigh it from that. Just so you guys know, in America, for 2 solid years into it, no, morticians didn't really need to hire anybody. I found like 2 or 3 cases. And guess what? Those were the cases that ended up on NPR. They go, yes, we had to double the number of people we had from 1 to 2. Okay, got it. That's because more hospitals are sending it to you. Got it. That makes sense. There are people dying. I have no opinion outside of that. I'm just saying it's not what you think it is. Dev systems, tools. Today, there is an advantage. I won't say things are different. There's an advantage that everyone has a computer at home. Like when I built my first game company, I had to buy people computers for home. That way they would just have it if they needed to be sick or they were going to hang out at home or do that. I never cared if they came in the office. So I ended up having to buy twice the number of computers. Well, today, tools are the game. And really it's online accounts. So you're buying everybody an account. Hey, $15, $30 an hour, 10 people, 300. Now you're at $3,000 to $7,000 per month, per year. And it just hits you all of a sudden because the bill comes around a year later. Be careful of that. Just warning you. Just as long as you or someone you trust deeply who's keeping an eye on your company is constantly doing a real-time spreadsheet with you, you'll be okay. But don't get into this unless you know how to use a spreadsheet. I'll just say that. That's the thing that's going to save you right there. Again, it's all the boring stuff. Here's one that's huge. Again, I was one of the first companies that I'm aware of in history to do this. Because of my language abilities and my friends all speaking multiple languages, all products back in the 80s, 90s, those were translated by outside translation houses. Not in my company. We were already in 40 languages by the time we shipped. So I would Farsi, French, dialects of French, Andorra, Spain, Basque. Basque is one of my first languages. We would translate to anything we can. The more languages you translate to and do it well, show respect. I'm just giving everyone here, I'm sure, there's a few people on this call that speak multiple languages. Respect. It's hard for Americans to even understand this. I'm just saying to all the Americans on the call here, almost no American ever is respectful. I'm just using that one word of other people's languages and their cultures. They don't intend to be rude. That's not the issue. But you don't know because foreign people to America usually won't tell you because it's not even worth hurting your feelings. It's not even worth having the conversation. But I can almost guarantee to you, any American who has not grown up internationally or doesn't have some reason to speak other languages and got immersed, they'll come off as rude. And they don't realize it, and they're forgiven because they're Americans, but don't be forgiven. Do it well. Be respectful. Some of my best sales came from the weirdest countries, and they would buy like 3,000 copies out of nowhere. 3,000 times $20. I'll take that money. Thank you. So co-development ports, I mentioned it before. Co-development ports means you're sometimes working with other companies changing your code. Be careful with that situation. Outsourcing, sending to other countries. If you don't know somebody who's had a relationship and physically can be in that other country, do not outsource. If you don't know that culture, for me to outsource to Russia in the old days, easy. But I also knew that every piece of hardware I sent there was going to disappear. I built it into my funds. Other companies would call me and go, what are you doing with Russia? And I'd go, why? And they go, I think they stole all my computers. I said, no, they didn't steal it. Don't say that to them. That's insulting. They really didn't. They thought you understood. You're giving it to them. They're like, no, why would I give it to them? Did you write in your contract you're not giving it to them? They're like, no. I said, then you gave it to them. You send them something. There's a great comedian from India. He's sitting there with a microphone, and he says, he taps the microphone near his lips, and he goes, usually anything that gets this close to my lips, I eat. And it was just the way he delivered it. This was like 30 years ago. Same story. It's like, you just need to understand the culture, and they're allowed to be the ones who bitch about themselves. So keep that in mind. If you haven't done it before, it's going to go badly for you if you don't step in there. And I have a word for that. I call it claim theory. It's human nature. You think you understand how something works, and then you guess. Don't guess. Make sure you know what you're talking about. Next item on money, capitalization and credit. Have some. When I was building one of my first games for Disney, it was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It was 1988. I was just doing this out of my own pocket. I had cash in the bank. And I was very fortunate that a person took pity on me, quite literally. And he said, "You're an idiot." And he was right. And he said, "You need a line of credit, get a line of credit at this bank." And so I ended up going to this bank. And later I ended up owning part of that bank because I realized, hey, that's a better business. The key aspect was, again, I mentioned having money, but also learning how to float money, learning about money. I would say, again, if you're going to build anything, it's not just video games, if you're going to build something that's going to start making you money, you really have to take an interest in this. And if you don't like this topic, you better have a partner that does this for you. I'm not mentioning it in all this stuff, but the luck of partner is a phrase I could write a book called The Luck of Partner. And what I mean by that is Walt Disney, awesome. Roy Disney, awesomer. I met Roy, awesomer. He's why Disneyland exists, not Walt. Walt had the vision, got that. People don't always understand what the relationships are, that there's a finance person or a partner or a husband or a wife that's behind the person you don't know about, you don't hear about them, but they really did more and they don't need the credit, but they also cause something to happen. They cause the market to misunderstand. So you hear these stories and you never hear about the other side. There's some guy on, if you go on the web and search for it, it's the guy, give me a second to get the names correct. Yes, this one was Bezos stole from. And I heard the whole story and I'm like, he didn't do anything really that bad. I mean, Bezos was like, not a bad guy per se, but yeah, there's more to the story. In other words, another one is Mark Cuban. Yeah, he took credit for things, but more importantly, he just never talked about the person from which the credit came from. I was there back then, so it's like, yeah, I knew what was happening there. My point is, without some digging, you're not going to find this out, but I almost never see a story online where it is what it appears to be. Okay, legal. Before I go to legal, let me just check something here. Özgür, who's in Turkey, I believe. This is why there's so many hyper casual game companies. Yeah, absolutely. In countries where economics are strenuous, you're going to get lots of little cute things. And that's why, I'll make this one sentence. Do not be surprised by how powerful Nigeria becomes in 10 years. Do not be surprised. In every part, finance, economics, movie making, video game making, book writing, I don't care what the topic is. That is a country with smart people who have lived in poverty, and that's going to change, just like it did for China. There, you have it on the table. Would I hire them right now? Yes, for some things. I have people from Nigeria working for me, and I'm very happy with them. So just keep that in mind. You guys all hear the horror stories. Again, media being wrong. Most people there are really good. They just live in horrible conditions. So let me read the rest of this real quick. Is an actual question. Okay, many Americans do not spend. Yeah, very few Americans even have passports. That's a whole separate conversation. Okay, legal. This is probably the topic I know the most about. I've been in more lawsuits than almost anybody you'll ever meet, and in every capacity. Again, this is going to sound arrogant, but it's a factoid. In fact, there's, I think, a lawyer on the call right this moment who's worked with me. I've never lost a lawsuit. I'm vicious at that level. People think I'm litigious. Actually, I don't start the lawsuits. I finish them. I also don't do bad things. So I do have one thing on my side. I'm in the right. That helps a lot. If I was in the wrong, I don't know that I could pull off what I do. But I will tell you, I am pro-lawyer. I will say bad things about lawyers because they're human. I say bad things about everybody. But just so you know, find any lawyer that is a real lawyer. And I say the word real very rarely in front of another word. I just want you guys all to know this. It's probably the most powerful, useful advice I can give you. Most lawyers are not lawyers that you are going to care about the same way most doctors are not doctors you're going to care about. A doctor spends 7 years in college doing all their thing, doing the residency, etc. And they could be a skin doctor. And you don't care about a skin doctor if you have a lung problem. In fact, they may not even know what your problem is. A neurologist and a proctologist, they don't know what the other one does. In fact, they can't have a conversation. nor can lawyers. You can put 5 different types of lawyers in a room together and they don't even know what each other does all day long. So to the layperson, you think lawyer, oh, you're a lawyer, you must have learned. No, there's only one type of lawyer. I'm giving you the most valuable piece of advice right this second that I'm putting in my first book on contracts negotiations about lawyers, which is you want to find a lawyer who wrote the contract and fought that contract in court. Even better, they fought their contract and they fought against somebody else's contract. What you don't want is a contract lawyer. And that's the weird thing. Contract lawyers write contracts, but very few of them have actually ever fought in court. They may have sat in, and in fact, I've had one try to defend themselves to me, and he was like, "Well, I spent a weekend on here, and I did this over there, and I was in 5 cases. Like, were you on the floor? Were you fighting it?" It's like, "Oh, no, I was there. I was being asked by my company or blah blah blah." Like, no, I get that you can write words on a piece of paper. You don't know what they mean until the end. The largest amount of money I've ever lost because of a contract was because of that problem. And I've watched other people have the exact same problem. So it's a conversation I have often with people. Oh, did they cover you here? Did they know about this problem? Many lawyers, there's several lawyers, very powerful lawyers. In fact, one of the lawyers, he fought one of the big FedEx cases in the early days. And I get a call from him one day and he goes, "Hey, I need your help. Okay. Can you help me write my contract?" I'm like, "What do you mean your contract?" He goes, "Well, I'm signing a contract with this company." I went, "Why are you coming to me? You're like he's like $1,000 an hour lawyer. What are you talking to me for?" He goes, "I don't know anything about contracts. I don't even know a good contract lawyer. But when I talk to you, you name every point I care about." I'm like, "Got it." That's one of the reasons I'm writing a book on contracts negotiations. I'll be doing it with lawyers helping me. Damn straight. One of their jobs is making sure I don't say something that gets me sued again. So, because I want to say a lot of stuff. I've been gag ordered quite a few times in my life. People don't want me to say the things I say. So I will go to the experts. There's not one word I will write without oversight by somebody smarter or more talented or more skilled than myself. But I do know the concepts here. And it's kind of interesting to see that. So on lawyers, I can't express that enough. How do you find a good lawyer? I don't know. Yes, I could probably direct you to a lawyer, but I don't know if those lawyers would want to work with you. They have their own things they do. So understand, it's a marriage. You're going to find a lawyer. You're the one being interviewed, not them, from their point of view. You just should be interviewing them. Most lay people don't. That's all. In movies, you see it once in a blue moon when they're trying to show off the villain who knows what he's talking about. They're interviewing the lawyer. But other than that, you almost never see that happen. And it's a shame. We should show it to people more often. How to read a contract. That's the other thing I'm going to be putting in my book in the future. But what I can tell you right this second is you're not ready. If you have to even ask that question, you're just not ready. And there is no good way for a lawyer to teach you. I'm sorry. That's the one that's hard. You have to take an interest and you have to love it. It's probably the hardest thing on the whole list. It's the one thing where you can't cram for it. You will get screwed. What you can do is right now, take out people to lunch who've been sued and let them, you'll be providing a wonderful service to them because everyone likes to complain about their lawsuits, and have them talk to you about what they would have changed in the contract, which could have prevented that. And a lot of them will say to you, nothing in the contract would have prevented me from knowing they were a cheating asshole or whatever it is. That's a reality. However, push on people to tell you what they have changed in a contract. Same thing with that spreadsheet I mentioned about the finances. Try to get one after the project's finished and confirm it. Same thing with a contract. What would you change now looking back? Usually it's about how harsh things are if things don't meet deadlines. Be careful. My last sentence here that I wrote for myself to remind you guys about is, and Rob here was kind of transactional lawyer versus litigator. Yeah, you want a litigator. The word litigator means they've done real battle with a sword and a shield in a pit of lions. That's what litigator means. You want litigators. Everybody else, not so much. So, true story. When I used to get surgery back in the 70s and 80s, they had to be doctors who had served in the military in action. That was my requirement. I'm like, you can leave a scar on me, but I know you know how to stand on your feet and do your work. That's all I cared about. Other than that, back in the old days, I would check to see if they had anything, something to drink. Separate issue. Those days are gone, luckily, almost completely. IP, patents, trademarks, and copyrights. You will probably make more money by knowing those topics well, by understanding what's worth patenting and not, what's worth trademarking and not, and how your copyrights actually work. I'm not going to go into detail in these, but what I'm going to tell you is the money that you make are going to be in hindsight. The great stories you guys hear about where like Jack Nicholson got a few points on Batman. Yeah, that's where the billions come from. When you hear about somebody like Nicholson making $300 million, he didn't make it by, he got it on the back end on a deal they weren't even comprehending at that time. Studios have gotten wise to all this. They don't allow that stuff anymore. And I should mention, one of the reasons I plan to write a book, and this will explain a little bit why I'm being a little harsh in some of the things I say here, is I wrote the contracts for Disney and Microsoft, etc. You would think they wrote them, but it was the Wild West back then, and I already had an idea in my head about what the structure of a contract should be because I wrote computer programs the same way. In fact, a computer program and a contract are the same thing. If you want anybody to check over your contract that is not a lawyer for any reason, I would pick a programmer. They will decode it. And you say to them, say, treat this like a computer program. Tell me what's wrong in here. And they'll find you stuff. They'll go, wait a minute, this says if X, then Y, you're screwed. They'll notice it before anybody else would. In fact, I often say programmers and litigators, very close, both in temperament and philosophy, as two fields in the world, closer than any of the other two I know of, so to each other. So that being said, it's usually not worth patenting, and it's better to do a trade secret. I'm just telling you that right now. Trademarks, go for it, knock yourself out, get whatever you can. And copyright is automatic. What you have to be careful of is being infringing on somebody else's copyright, patents, or trademarks. That's where your research is. You will save the most money with patent attorneys and IP attorneys, and I can suggest good ones to you guys. You will save the most money by doing your homework first. That's where the biggest savings is. There's a certain price. You're not going to get out of it for less than 15 to 20,000. Tell you that right now. But you can stop it from being 30 to 35,000 immediately by you spending a few weekends and getting into the pattern of it all. And they'll tell you that too. They won't misrepresent any of that. They'll tell you, they'll warn you, but no one ever does it and they don't listen. You should know your own patent inside and out. Okay, next one down. These are my last items. Let me check the right side for a second. Yes, how harsh deadlines, be careful in which way. Oh, harsh deadlines. Let me answer that. Let me speak negatively of EA from my point of view, and it is my opinion. And this is a long time ago, just in case this could come back and bite me because this is being recorded. I perceived a time in EA's history when there were a bunch of video game companies coming into existence because of positive tax benefits in Canada. There were a bunch of companies coming into existence up in Canada, other countries too, and other places too, and America, but a lot in Canada. And EA would end up owning these companies in weird ways. What I mean by owning them is they missed a deadline, they couldn't pay everybody, and now the negotiation begins. I was having dinner one night with a gentleman, and I was invited by an attorney, and there was other attorneys at the table. And I talked to one of them, and I said, "Oh, where do you work?" And he goes, "Atari." And I said, "Oh, what do you do at Atari?" And he goes, I do bankruptcies." And I said, "Are you planning to go bankrupt?" He goes, No, not ours." And he just smiles at me. And I'm like, oh. And then he proceeds to tell me there's four of us. There are four people at that time at Atari processing the bankruptcies of the companies Atari did business with back then. Nolan was no longer there. Nolan's the founder, an old friend of mine. I'm like, whoa. But we had a really interesting conversation. And in fact, later I ended up cutting a deal with Atari, but different group of people now. And that knowledge helped me write my contract with them. And what I did, this is to answer your question, I wrote my contract so they had a harsh deadline. And part of it was that if Atari went bankrupt, I get paid first before the creditors. And when I said this to them, they laughed at me. They laughed at me like, "Are you insane?" And I said, "Perhaps. What's your issue?" And they literally responded. I remember this was a fascinating conversation. I'm talking to like their VP and their head of a law firm, head of internal law, sorry. And they said, "We're not going to go bankrupt." I went, "Awesome. Then you have no problem signing this." And they both kind of looked at each other like, "You're right. and they signed it. And then they went bankrupt. And I got paid. In fact, I'm the only one who got paid. I'm it. That's part of my story. I've even got the paperwork from it. I even have the check from it. And it was a lot. It was nice. I would have lost that money if I hadn't done that. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about harsh realities on one side. The other side I'll say is this. It always looks good on paper. Oh, we'll be done by a certain date. But we're all assuming that everybody's going to be playing fair. And I'll quote Wozniak, one of my favorite humans on the planet. I'm misquoting him here because I'm very bad at quotes, even my own. But he basically said, look, I was very moral, and all the people at Apple who were the executive level, they didn't feel I had business ethics. And yeah, I'm the same. You're not wired for the type of bullshit executives will pull. But remember, they're not creative in the way you are if you're an artist. And this is the only money they're ever going to make. Most of you, if you're in any form creative, you can go make something else tomorrow. You'll probably be starving if you're an artist. That's just the reality of it. But you will make something. You'll do something. And if you work, you'll make it happen. But they have nothing. All they have is attaching themselves to you. So they're motivated very differently. It's the tiger and the rabbit. The tiger is chasing its dinner, but the rabbit is running for its life. So in fact, tigers actually catch the rabbits very rarely. That logic applies here as well. So they're tigers. They're dangerous, but you have more skin in that game. Respect it. That's what I mean by being careful. And you have to be really careful of timelines, deadlines, etc. And what happens if you're late. Acts of God are not good enough. Be careful. So talk to as many people as you can that were late with a deadline and then ask them what happened. It's very rarely a nice story. So usually the company ends up owning you. So, halt control, yeah, exactly. Oh, right, wait, I made a mistake earlier. I misread that just, with the Halt and Catch Fire. I was thinking of something different. I was thinking about a video game called Halt and Catch Fire. Small note, yeah, I'm actually in that movie. There's a little piece of it. In fact, I went and looked up who the writers were, and they know people I know, so I know these stories went around. And there's only one company that had the very bug they talked about in it, and it was in my multiplayer tank game. Yes, you see, you're actually nailing that correctly. There's actually I know a lot of those people in that movie. If you're going to make video games, definitely watch Halt and Catch Fire. I totally agree. I'm currently watching a Mystic Quest, I think it's called. And when I started watching it, it was hard for me to watch because it was both making me laugh and making me cry. I'm like, oh my God, that's so realistic. I looked it up, and Ubisoft is their advisors. So they actually have a real video game company advising them on plots and story points. And they are, in fact, way too dead on. The more ridiculous you see, the more real it really is. I can walk through it with you and go, that's real, that's real. I know what company did that. Yeah, it's pretty much nonstop. The video game business is not like as bad or weird as the rock star music business. I assure you of that. I've never heard a story from the computer business that's more shocking as to what people do to each other. However, what they do with money and legal, yes. Money and legal is much worse in the video game business by far than the rock and roll business, as horrible as rock and roll business could be. So I won't watch Silicon Valley yet. I think I'd have a coronary. So I've already been told how well it's done. Next one, negotiating. I'm going to end this on this and open this all up to any questions. Game theory. I mentioned it at the very beginning. Small versus big. I want to tell you guys a quick story. I built a video game. And then I decided to be my own publisher. And immediately, some really bad, weird things happened. People would call me kind of nasty. It was like having almost mob-like mentality out there. I was surprised by it. And I was already publishing other people's books, other music, and I was being good to all these people. I was helping them, selling their stuff. In fact, some of the people I didn't even make a profit. We'd bring people in and go, I'll just take care of your publishing, and here you can just do the economics yourself. You don't need to get the numbers from me. I'll run the company. I'll take care of it for you. Just be safe. I have many friends like that, and still these are friends today, who I just made sure they weren't being screwed by somebody. We would sell their products in Germany, Japan, etc. Okay. When I made video games, I would make them with very, very small teams. Everything we did, fast, small. I would often be compared, and there was an electronics arts game being made at the time, and I think it was Dave Maynard. You can look him up, sweet guy. And we're on the phone at some point, and he was kind of bragging about what he was working on. And he has good reason to brag. He was making a great product, and he's a really great producer. And I said to him, I said, yeah, but you don't make that money. They do. I mean, you might get a bonus, but that's why the best is going to go for you. And he kind of didn't even understand what I was saying. And I said, see, I don't have your overhead to deal with. I don't have to answer to anybody else. I'd rather make a little tiny game than have a big game any day of the week. And so this is again, one of the tricks that I think is the greatest chance for your success. The very first game I made, there were two of us, and I did all the art. I did all the core programming that made the operation of the game. And then my partner, small note, it's 37 years ago, 38 years ago. He's still with me today. I talked to him this morning. We don't do video games at all. We just kept changing from thing to thing. And I have many people in my team like this. They've just changed with me. And we just built that game. And so it was easy to do that. And then we made a sequel to it for the 3DO. This was called Return Fire. And that was a group, max 5. I think it was 4 of us. There was a producer, myself, programmer, and artist. That was it. Yeah, that was it. It was 4 of us. And up against companies that had 100, 120. We did it in 8 months, I think. They would be doing it back then, 18 months, another extra year onto all that. That's a lot of money. I also did no advertising ever. On any of my products, I've never done advertising. And again, we're going to talk about luck real fast. This is negotiating. I'm going to give you an example of negotiating. I called the biggest magazine at the time. It was called Electronic Gaming Monthly. And I knew the editor, he'd come from another magazine. And I told him what I was working on. And he said, are you going to advertise? And I immediately responded, and I had to know to do this. I said, are you not going to review my product if I don't advertise? Because if he had said something he could have said, that would have been illegal for him. He would have been, committing a crime. And he said, no, of course. And of course, now he has to advertise. I mean, he has to, review my product. He may not give you a good review, but so I'm talking to him. And this is all social engineering. I'm talking, hacking here. This is hacking social. So I'm talking to him, and I said, who are your testers? He mentioned some of them. I said, I want to send you the game in its current state. Can I do that? And he goes, yeah, sure. Great. I sent off 5 copies of the games to them. I get a call 5 or 6 days later. Remember, this is physical mail back then. It wasn't like email. It wasn't like sending it over a computer to him. I had to send him the discs. And he calls me back, yelling at me, literally, you fucking asshole. And he goes, what'd you do? And I said, I actually didn't know what he was talking about. I actually hadn't done anything wrong. I was just like, what are you talking about? And he goes, all my guys are just playing your game all day long now. And so I already knew it had an addicting factor. I didn't know how much, but apparently it really worked with this group inside his, testing group. And they are loving it. And as we're talking, he says, well, now are you going to advertise? And I said, I'll try, but I don't have a budget for advertising. We haven't gotten there yet. But I have a question for you. And it sounded like I was asking him a question that had nothing to do with our product. And I said, when you do a review of one of these products, my product has large maps in it. How do you guys print the maps? And I had no real plan as to where this conversation was going. This is negotiating. I was talking to him. I always like to just feel the waters, but it's always on top. It's on topic. We're trying to move through it. And I said, how do you do this? And he says, actually, it's a real problem. And it wastes a lot of their time. And I said, why? And he says, well, because what we have to do is we have to put it on the screen, move it around. We have a special hardware device that captures the screen. They stitch it all back together again. They get these 4K by 4K images. I said, can I talk to your printer? I understand the word printer back then meant a real person. And he goes, sure, what are you going to talk to them about? I said, I might be able to skip all of that, but I need to talk to your printer first. He puts me through the printer. Back then, people would let you do stuff. They'll often let you do stuff, especially even today. I still do stuff like this. They'll let you do it if they don't understand what you're talking about at all. There's actually an advantage there. I just want to mention it. Can I talk to the person you don't care about? Yes, you can. That's what was happening. This happens constantly with me. I'm asking a question. They send me around. They sent me directly to the printer. I talked to the printer. And I have a small advantage here. I build software for printers, physical printers. And so I said, what's your big issues? And he explains all the issues and how even when they stitch it together, how wrong it is, the different images get different color correction, blah, blah. I said, what format do you want? And he says, oh, it's some custom format this weird printer from, Fuji in Japan makes, blah, 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 giant machine, some warehouse they have. I said, describe all of it to me, physically send me the manual. And he did. And I grabbed my programmers that night as we're staying up all night. I want this out the door by tomorrow morning. And what we did is we grabbed all of our maps. We wrote a converter. We double tested it. We built him a disk in the physical format of what that machine needs. We were running around town to make all this happen. Next morning, on an airplane, delivering it directly to the magazine, sent it right down to this guy. Flash forward, we got a 17-page review of our game. At that time in history, the largest we'd ever seen was 5. 17 pages, because we made it easy for them. We pulled a thorn out of their paw. That phrase I just said to you, thorn out of the paw, use that everywhere. It's not just what can you do for somebody else. That's not what's being said. What I'm saying is figure out their pain point and get rid of it. Now we're talking. I recognize as they were talking what their pain, when they're talking about, oh, this causes us stress. When they use words like stress or this is a pain in the ass, I want to hear more. Because often you can fix it. And so you end up doing things, again, same theme as me having a couple of kids parked next to physical phone booths, because we didn't have cell phones back then, waiting for a call to come in so I could get them to come to the studio fast. I'm going this direction to go this direction. My velocity could be 0 for periods of time. I'm going nowhere very fast, but eventually you turn in the right direction. Eventually you go the right direction. So that's big versus small. You can do a lot, but be ready for it. Start that stuff in parallel. Know your cost of goods. You can always negotiate a better price. There's always a better deal. Tonight, I scheduled a hotel I'm going to pick up in Japan. So I fly all over the place. My trick, I can tell you my trick. I'm going to save you some money right this second. This is cost of goods on video games. I'm telling you the same thing, but you have to stick with it. Change your VPN number. I changed my VPN number to countries that are doing badly, countries that are losing money, Venezuela, Mexico. I go to certain Japanese provinces are actually, their economics are so bad, it actually affects the pricing you get on airplanes. And you sometimes just have to try with like 20 windows open, and I'll suddenly see, I just saved myself 30% on a flight. I can save $1,000 here and there. It's worth it. Cost of goods. I don't care what you're going to pay for something. There's somebody who will do even a better job for less. You have to decide your own time and value. The advertising story you now know. And then here's my last point on negotiating. And this also comes back to answer your question earlier that you mentioned about, you're asking about what's a harsh deadline. I use a word, fail-safe. It's used in the security and tech business. In banking, it's used as an example. I guys want you to imagine you have a bank. People walk into the bank. Obviously, the banks can get robbed. They can lock the doors. That could be very dangerous. But what if there's a fire? If there's a fire, should they lock the doors or should they unlock the doors? If you have a fire, you have a problem. It's a bank. You want to lock the doors to protect the expensive stuff, but you also want to unlock the door because it's not safe for other people. So fail-safe is a philosophy. It's not a single condition. But when you're writing contracts, when you're cutting deals, everything you're doing, make sure it's going towards fail-safe. What it means is you've already thought through from a game theory perspective where you're going to end up. You have to look at it from the point of view of all the failure points and what you're actually going to do to stop that. And if you don't have a bunch of models, and it should be more than 1 or 2, like in the poker world, if you don't know who the sucker is, it's you. In the negotiating business, same thing. So fail-safe is a way of thinking. It's basically saying that when you're doing any type of negotiation, remember, they're also negotiating with every one of your competitors all the time. Never be comfortable. Never feel okay. Always be weighing how you're going to be more valuable later. Reread your contract. Leave it out on your desk and reread it every few months, every few weeks, depending on the speed you're moving. But the other fail-safe is, if everything came to an end right this moment, already be mentally thinking in terms of what happens now. Who owns what? Who has the source code? Apply that to your own team. Make sure they're checking everything in. Make sure you have a backup. I've watched a lot of people, this sounds really kind of gruesome. I've watched a lot of people die in the past 40 years. Just die, disappear. A lot. At this age that I am now, I'm seeing somebody pass away about every 3 to 4 months. people I've worked with, people I've seen do great projects, they're passing away just as you get older. When you're working, even if you're young right now, even if you're in your 20s or 30s, it's more complex out there in the world. So if we're not talking about actual physical death, we're talking about just life being complex and somebody you thought you could depend on disappearing. You need to be thinking about it. You need to kind of talk about it openly, because I have found overall, and I'll kind of leave this on this last point about fail-safe, being honest with everybody is always the best pattern. And sometimes it's hard to do because you think that talking about it could make it worse. I'll just tell you, I don't see that almost ever happening. I'll say 1%, 2%. Being honest with everybody only instills them to you. That's what really happens. They respect you for it. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. That's everything I could think of. That's everything, all my biggest topics I could hit on. I could clearly go on this for hours. I will open it up to questions. I don't see any question marks in the past few messages. So if you post something first with a question, or if you want to, I don't know a good way in this software to raise a hand type of thing. So I would just ask that you post in there. And then if you see yourself being the first person to post, you ask the question. You can post just a question mark if you want to. I can see clearly.
Really quick.
I'm not saying about post anything, so Michael, you go.
Yeah, really, and I posted in there, I just forgot the question. A really quick question for you about game theory. And I think the abundance of information is very useful, but I think this idea of fail safes and visually mapping them for different people may be different ways, but particularly the idea of 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. And so at a minimum, having 3 fail safes within that sort of thinking. What are the best tools that you have found specifically for different domains, but video games being the topic we're on, sure, for visualizing your game theory and mapping?
My answer is itself a skill, not a talent. I'm really big on flowcharts. I am really big on making everybody on a team tell the story of whatever we're building together in a room together and talk about failure. And so I speak always in terms of, here's a verbal description of a picture's worth 1,000 words. I'll try to keep this to like 100. Draw a flow chart from one side of the screen to the other, or paper, however you want to think of it, or top to bottom, I don't care. But pick an orientation. The orientation is path to success. Write everything as if it went perfectly. I don't care what the topic is. We can talk about a business plan. We can talk about building a bathroom on your house, walking your dog. I don't care. I'm going to get the leash. I'm going to open the front door. We're going to go outside. Oh, crap. I need to have a bag in case he poops. Go back to square one. Get the bag, get the leash, get the dog out the door. Just do your path to success. When you're done with that, go back and start reading it and try to get everybody to come up with the best negative things they can. Humans are really good at that. That's how I do it. Over and over again. One of my favorite companies, a company called Westwood Associates. 2 guys who ran it. They did the video game Command and Conquer back in the old days. They did one of the best things I ever heard about in the video game business. They would get everyone together like on a Friday night, and everyone would try to complain and out-complain each other about what was the worst thing about the game that they were working on. Make a top 10 list, and come Monday, they would fix what was ever at the top of that list. Smartest philosophy I've seen out there. So few companies do this anything. What I just told you, because you mentioned different domains, or I would use a slightly different word there, I would say verticals. This is just my terminology. If you're writing a sitcom, or you're writing a comedy skit, or you're laying things, same exact logic. Write the story, write how the story goes badly, and it suddenly becomes really clear. All these are just good thinking processes. So there's your answer. I'll jump to the next person. Picking up on the last point, what are your thoughts on honesty versus transparency? Nothing will make me more uncomfortable than having to withhold information, and yet I've spent most of my life keeping secrets for other people. I've worked for the DoD. In fact, you might notice, if some of you have known me for a while, you've noticed like about 8 years ago, I began talking about a lot of stuff that I never would have talked about originally. Probably one of the things, if you guys dig into on the internet, that I can talk about right this second easily, and I have no problem talking about it, is I helped bring Epstein down, and Jeffrey Epstein. I did things to make sure that man would go down, in the sense that we knew very clearly what he was before the world really understood what he was. And so I worked with authorities, and we had a plan, and we did the right thing at the right time. I get to talk now about the stuff I did for the military, for the Department of Defense. I never thought I ever would. I never thought I would ever speak about these things. Um, what I can tell you is that every secret I've ever had to keep hurt somebody. And so personally, you guys probably have heard this statement. I'm going to tell you it's not true, that people who are on the spectrum don't lie. That is completely not true. However, there is something that's true about it, which is why people even believe that. And when you hear this, I think you'll understand it very clearly. Aside from the fact that we usually have very poor memories, I definitely everyone around me who's on the spectrum has a bad memory, so we can't really keep track of crap, and we think too fast for that, anyways. And things are too noisy. We don't lie about silly things. That part is probably pretty true. Whereas, and neurotypicals aren't aware of this, they lie nonstop. Neurotypicals, fundamentally, if their lips are moving, they're lying. And that's why you'll see a lot of pained looks on people who are on the spectrum's face when they're talking neurotypicals. Not just are they being loud and smelly and all that stuff, that's all the people who are sensitive, but just the part where every bloody sentence that comes out of your mouth is like, what are you saying? That's just a lie. And there's a lot of like anger about the whole thing. So that part's pretty much true. All I can tell you is that all humans lie, and they're lying all the time, and they have to protect what they have to protect. But as every time I've ever had to tell people something I know that was going to hurt them, the more honest I could be about it, and the more clear I could be about it, and the less I could bring my own emotions into it, the more they appreciated it every single time. Horrible things I've had to tell people. They have to get fired, they have to lose money, or somebody just died. I mean, I've had to tell people all sorts of horrible things. And I'm like, sit down. This is hard for me as well. I'm just going to tell you everything. Feel free to interrupt me if you need to. That's usually the first thing I tell anybody, because again, I'm not a very emotional person, at least the way most people would understand it. And I know everyone else pretty much is. And so one of the first things I tell people is, if you need me to stop, just say stop and I'll stop. Because I have learned that when they're getting emotional, they can get angry at me because I'm continuing to talk about something that's causing them pain. If you're just sensitive to that one thing, the thing that I think makes most people scared to tell everybody else the transparent truth is just that little part of it, which is the pain of seeing pain in other people's faces. Get over that as fast as you can. So that's why I gave that so much time right now, because it's such an important topic. We definitely could, there are some good books. I have not ever seen a good book on it, but there are some good books on that topic. There's a woman named Tannenbaum, I recall, back in the 80s, 90s. She actually did a pretty good job of teaching people how to talk realistically to other people about painful topics, but I would go after that. Okay, let me zoom through the questions. Let me zoom up, give me 1 second. Gabe, got it, okay. Pros and cons on Valve, how Gabe has built that game company. I don't want to be too specific about any current running companies. I'm impressed by Valve, I'll say that, but I sure as hell wouldn't want to be in their business. Even if it makes money, I just wouldn't want to be. I think that is, the economics behind that are really scary. I would have to get very specific. I mean, I'm willing to talk about it in the sense, and Michael, I don't know what you're doing to the camera, but it's turning me on. No, get it. So he's rubbing the camera. I have paid a slight bit of attention, but I look at it like I've seen 3 articles per year since the beginning. It's a really hard company to run. I can't even imagine. And I'm sure that's, that could be Silicon Valley. That could be, Mythic Quest or whatever it's called. I'm catching up on TV shows nowadays. All I can tell you is that, one of the bigger companies like that, really tough. If you want to build something for that, that's a platform, clearly. You have to treat that as a pure platform. Everything I said, though, I would apply. They're going to be out to get you until they're not. Just remember that. It's not that they're out to get you personally. It's that you're always competing with the other companies they need to give attention to. So inherently, you're going to lose out. Cross-collateralization is a phrase you guys should all write down. Cross-collateralization. That's when the money's divvied up among a group may end up going to one and everybody else gets screwed. That's one negative of that. If you don't know about cross-collateralizations, it's going to hurt you later, especially if you're grouped up with other artists, musicians, singers, designers, art, whatever it is, you'll get screwed by cross-collateralization. Being aware of it is what's often helped me not get screwed. I've actually put clauses in my contract saying no cross-collateralization. If you don't know to ask, they don't take it out. They're going to get away with whatever they can get away with. That's their job. I love Disney. That really actually is a real statement. I even love the way they do business. They're really harsh on people, but that's right. They need to be. I actually am on the Disney side, even when they were against me on some things. I'm on Disney side. They need to protect the mouse. You want them to protect the mouse. They own a great product, a great set of services. Respect it. Give the thing. And just so you know, and this is what most people do not know. I can speak of this openly. I don't work for them. I never have. They've always licensed my technology. I'll tell you a wonderful secret about Disney. They're worse to themselves. That one. Sorry about that. I think my internet went down for a second. What was the last word you heard me say?
They're worse to themselves.
Say it one more time.
They are worse to themselves.
Oh, so
You want Disney to protect the mouse.
yep. They are worse to themselves than everybody else. That's what people don't know. They have what's called a floor, which means that in order for Disney to sell Disney its own services, they charge. I don't know why that happened, and I don't know. Yep, everything's fine on my side. I don't know why I'm losing internet all of a sudden.
Yeah, someone's cutting transatlantic cables.
It could be. I do not know. But yes, the mouse is doing the right thing. I'm on their side. And so people go in there going, I'm going to give you my new technology and you're going to slap your mouse on it. No, other way around. Their mouse comes first, slap stuff on afterwards. So like, I'm going to go get permission from them to say a lot of private stuff that happened when we're doing business together. And what's funny is it's all fundamentally positive. It's all really on their side. I don't think they're gonna have any problem giving me permissions. I'm getting permissions from everybody about all the deals that I cut with everybody. And I just want to make sure, it's like they're happy. I don't have a lot of bad things to say. I mean, I know people love to hear the bad stuff, but actually most of it's pretty good. My warnings to you are true, but if you have a healthy relationship with somebody, and make sure that you do that, make sure that you're signing with the contract, not the person. It's kind of backwards advice, and you probably hear from everybody, but that would be an example, meaning they may leave. They may not be the vice president when you're talking to them 6 months from now or 6 years from now. Make sure the contract holds up because the new person could be a very different type of person. So you're signing an agreement with the contract, not the person who's signing it with you at that company. Keep that in your mind, write that down. You'll be a happier person. Okay, let me zoom back up, make sure I get the rest of this. That was the pros and cons. How do you get a lead funder producer? I'm looking at Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen and I think the world of her, just, I'm one of I think I was maybe the only back then. Back then, this is definitely true. I'm the only person she ever walked in, looked at what I was doing, approved it, and walked out. Which even the people who came in with her looked and went, do you know her? And I didn't know her at that time. Like, no, and I don't even know her now. I met her like 3 times in my life. And she looked around and went, that's good enough. I was doing Who Framed Roger Rabbit. She was working with Spielberg at the time. And she had looked at like 10 other companies, Mattel, all these other companies, and their artwork was horrible. All my artists, including myself, and my background is a fine artist, our art level was so good because they were all the Disney artists who did the drawing of Roger Rabbit, the movie. I pulled them right from Disney and Bear Animation and other places. I'm like, let's get the best people possible here and make the art the best it can be. And anybody who wasn't an animator from that, they were the best artists in the industry. And so our quality was so much better than everybody else's. She just walked in and went, that looks great. She should have probably checked like the gameplay and all that, which was still good enough. But she had to judge what little she could in the speed she worked. She may be one of the most unsung heroes of the movie business, in my opinion. She may be one of the most amazing humans in the business. People know very little about her, but if you ever want to, anything you read about her, you're going to learn something. I'll just say it that way. So there's Kathleen. Let's see, you actually asked a question. How do you get your lead producer? Okay. She's 1 in a billion, maybe 1 in 12 billion. We don't even have 12 billion people on the planet. How do you get her attention? Quality. Better be visual, whatever it is. It better be visually impressive first, followed by whatever the slogan statement, whatever it is that goes with it. It better be something that everyone in the room instantly goes, oh yeah, that was cool. That's it. If you want her, you want the best. I mean, she's amazing. If people want to stay connected, I'm not sure what that's referring to. Oh, I see. You're giving your link. Got it. Cool. Yes. Excellent. Next, for anyone who wants an after party. Okay, got it. Cool. Yes, Amanda would be a wonderful person to do after party. Very cool. Let's see. Compared to you all, probably. Brenda. Okay, got it. I am still at the point of knowing nearly nothing. Yep. It's also you have a huge advantage there. You know, look, if you're young and you're attacking this, you hear this from people. If you're young and while you're young, you feel like, no, I'm my age and things are going to be horrible. No, you're going to be okay. You've got the energy. This like good time to have kids, good time to build a company, good time to do whatever you're going to do. Whatever it is, physical, mental, you want to go get your body in perfect shape and climb up a mountain. This is the time to die. So I'll just say that actually is true. But let me read the rest of your point. Business aside from what I have been seeing as a worker in game notice, just curiosity, desire, wish. Okay, right. What are base skills you best recommend? If you could only have one skill, it's make people like you that are talented to come help you. That's it. If you only have one ability, it better be a good personality. I don't have a good personality, so I've had to fight. I'm always amazed anybody works with me, just so you guys know. And it sounds like I'm making a joke. I so am not making a joke. I'm so telling you the truth. I'm always surprised people think what I'm saying is funny or that I'm getting along with anybody. I'm always like, really? You're going to show up again tomorrow? Wow. Okay. I'm amazed my wife is sitting here. I don't know why she married me. So, well, I'm lucky. Okay. Some courses or book recommendations. I'm bad with any modern book recommendations because everything I've read in the past 5 years pisses me off. Everything upsets me. I read it and it's being written by somebody who either got lucky or what. I'm not saying anything negative about this person I'm about to speak about, but there's a guy, his name's Sean Rad. He did Tinder. He's an impressive human being. He has a wonderful success. There's a type of success, though, that I'm a little harsh on. And Apple, and I'm comparing him to Apple here, so again, no insults. Apple does this too. Apple doesn't make products great. Apple makes those great products that match their pattern great. It's really important to understand. He built a formula with several others that is awesome. But as I like to point out, imagine if Apple made diaper commercials. We can all imagine what a diaper commercial looks like from Apple, all of us. It's a big white empty room with beautiful children of all colors and all sizes and shapes in their beautiful white diapers that are made by Apple with the Apple logo on it. And it's a clean room and the kids are happy. That's it. That's our Apple ad. Maybe it says think different or have fun. I don't know. What's their slogan? My point is, try to picture companies that make whatever they make, making something different. The formula has to be right. So when you say, what are the base skills to recommend? What is that? What are the books to recommend? When I read books by successful companies, I don't know that you can make it apply. I appreciate it, but when you ask, and here's my favorite part, ask the question backwards. The people who write books, even if they write their book badly, try to find the part where they talk about what books they thought were great. Now you're getting somewhere. In other words, their book might be BS, but there's a better chance that the book they suggest in their book is actually something useful. Guy Kawasaki mentions a book. He's mentioning it for a reason. There's value in that. Whether he writes a book that's good, we don't even care about. So, but he's a good book writer. I mean, he has a great formula. I can tell everybody here his formula because I've read every one of his books. Here's the formula. You give people a piece of marketing or business advice, and then you follow it up with, here's how it can go right, and here's how it can go wrong. And you say that as if you're Confucius. And everyone reads it, and they hear it the positive way in their head, whichever the positive they want. If they want to hear the negative thing, so they learned from negative, they hear that as a positive statement and go, oh, you've warned me about the bad thing. And if they want to hear the positive thing, they hear that as positive. So he wins either way. That makes him brilliant. You read through his stuff, you'll go, oh my God, I'm seeing this pattern over and over again. And my question was, but are you right? And one of the things I did with his books, this is a great example of why when you say, can I suggest a book? Well, here's a guy who wrote books 10, 20 years ago. I think he's writing books recently. But here's the problem, is that I went through his books and I highlighted all the stuff where it's his actual personal opinion. And almost every time he gives his opinion, it was wrong. One of his opinions from like 12 years ago, one of his books was, oh, bookstores will be around forever. I know people are even beginning to predict that they're going to be going away, but no way. We'll always love books. I'm like, dude, no. And you should have known that of anybody. My point is, every one of his predictions are like that. So all I'm saying is, are there any good books today? I'm going to tell you about a book which is going to make me sound super old and horrible, but Art of War. I first read it and thought it was silly. I read it again 20 years later, thought, oh, okay, I get it now. And then I read it again 20 years later, and I'm now like, oh my God, he's right. That's what happens. The book didn't change. I did. That's my advice on a lot of books out there. I will tell you one book that I think is really actually very impressive, only because I don't care. I've read all the negative things about this guy as well. They don't matter. That's rare for me to say, but anything you can find negative about him, it doesn't matter. There's a guy named David Goggins. He wrote a book, You Can't Hurt Me. He's an accidental cognitive scientist. It's the best way for me to describe him. He ran experiments on himself, and it wasn't even terribly interesting. He ran, like physically ran. And he ran. It's Forrest Gump. He just kept running. And then he ran himself into the military and suddenly kept collecting abilities, like becoming a SEAL, and then becoming a this and becoming a that. He's excuse my language, he's fucking awesome. And his origin story is boring. It's the same stuff. He was hurt by his father, blah, blah, blah. Everyone has the same origin story. My point is, even he'll be honest, and he doesn't speak in his own book. He has a journalist do it for him. Smartest thing he could have ever done. Again, he found somebody else to speak for him, because when he speaks poorly. You don't want this guy in communications, but he's honest about it, at least what he can be. And he's a normal human being. He's got his ego and all that in play. But there's something that will come across in what he writes. And it's a way to realistically not give up. That's the key. He's not unrealistic. He fights to the very end. And he ignores where other people can't prove their advice over his own experiences. And you should do that too. Everyone here should do that. Anybody who has a kid, you should tell them to do it. Go take those chances. Take the chance on getting hurt. Don't worry about that. It's going to happen no matter what. You're not going to avoid everything. Don't be fearful. And anybody who's younger right now, you already have an interesting advantage. You grew up as a team. You have more teamwork in you at a young age right now than anybody here that's over 45 or 50. Everyone here, we're all loners. We're lone wolves, blah, blah, blah. We have a huge disadvantage. We don't trust each other. We fight about things. We have our own weird things. But if you're younger, you actually have grown up with way more teamwork. Now what you have to do is make everybody accountable. That's what you don't have at this age, in this era. People are very flaky. You want proof of that? I can say one word, and everyone on this call will agree with me instantly. You want to see proof that we all can't get along well enough? Dating. One word, dating. Everything that happens in dating, my complaint with Tinder, that's not dating. That's swiping. Swiping is not dating. My point is, when you're doing business and you're sitting there in a conference room with a bunch of other people doing business, those are the same people you're dating on those same apps. When you realize that, you realize how insane everybody is and how flaky they are. They might ghost you. Everything you can say about dating, you can say about negotiating a contract in business today. This would not have been the case, I think, back in the 80s, 90s. But I would definitely say that part is different today. Not the making of the products and all that, but definitely the way the negotiation happens and what you have to be aware of. It's much worse. So that's it. That's my best answer to your question there. I think I hit everything here. I don't want to push you guys too long. Let me just check the bottom here. The mouse, yep, Donald is in the machine, okay. How do you find investors? How do you find investors? Most stories I hear, I can't name names. I'm trying to get some people to give me permission to say stuff, because most good or positive investor stories are lies. I hear very few people telling the truth out there, especially the most important people you know out there. When they are telling you how they got investors, they're usually lying. They're leaving out so much stuff they don't want you to know about. That said, let's see, funding or the appearance of funding. Yep, the appearance of funding. Yep, most people are lying. In fact, I can say this. It's kind of like 95% are lying and the other 5% are getting too much money. And when you find out why and how, that's even worse. So they were given $1 million extra every month. And you're like, why? And it's either nepotism or accident or luck. There are no good stories. And if you find one, please pass it to me. I'd like to see proof of it. If you can tell me a story where I can actually talk to the people involved, watch what happens when I cross-examine people. Magically, a different story comes out of their mouths. My favorite time, my favorite moment is when I'm either being depositioned or I'm depositioning. That's my favorite moment in life, because now it's a court order. It's a court reviewed document. You better tell the truth. So I see often new startups founders get funding. Yep. Okay. Yet the products they have isn't innovative constantly. Man, so many products get out there for the wrong reasons. Newer solving the problem. I can make a generic statement. The best product almost never wins. I have almost no examples. You name a product, I'll tell you about something that was cooler. We're on Zoom right now. I can tell you 3 products that were made by other companies that were so much better than Zoom. They're dead. So they worked well. The raising hand thing I mentioned earlier, one of the built-in features I still miss greatly is us being able to intelligently raise hands and all that stuff. I don't even know how to set that up in here. The other product, it was easy. It was obvious too. Obvious. I have 20 people that I do Zoom meetings with every week, and we all still have no idea what the buttons at the bottom mean. However, it didn't used to be that way. So why? What's changed? We're not changing how we use anything. I always have to guess at everything. Something's gone wrong. Okay. There you go. There's some mushrooms for you. Somebody sent up mushrooms. So how can us new to the game space gain more honest knowledge for fundraising? It still will come down to, I can't give you a useful answer there. I tell this to everybody. It's not about games or anything. Get an advisor board. It does not mean they are on your board of directors. Don't confuse the two. If you can put together a small group of people who are even just good business people, even people you're not going to like their advice or ever go along with it, just make sure their chemistry is good. The person who's run the 20-year shirt cleaning business down the street, you like them, invite them to a lunch, pay for lunch, pay $150 for lunch, whatever it is nowadays. Buy everybody lunch. They'll enjoy being important again. Say to them, I want to keep an hour of your time. Tell them what your problem is. Hear everybody's advice. What you're doing, and this is important to the whole thing. I want to make a mention here real fast of Myers-Briggs. I always have to qualify it every time, just like being on the spectrum, I have to qualify something. I don't agree with how Myers-Briggs is talked about or used out there. It's astrology as far as I'm concerned for the most part, for the way people talk about it. Do not confuse what I'm about to say. What I'm mentioning here is a labeling system to make a conversation faster. It was faster even for me to use this upfront time than it would be to explain this without using Myers-Briggs. I'm a certain personality type. Not just am I the personality type that I am, I'm the poster child of it, meaning of the 4 metrics, I'm the max that can be had. I am an INTJ. I am every super genius villain in every movie you've seen. I am Doctor Strange. I am Hannibal Lecter. Name it, I'm it. And actually, I'm both of them. I'm Hannibal Lecter, and I'm the agent. I've got Jodie Foster's character's name. I'm both, because they're both. That's actually a very rare movie where both sides were both INTJs. They're both super smart and wicked to each other. That's who I am. I am surrounded by INTPs, which is they're me, but indecisive from my point of view. What they are is people who they care about having the best experience. So they're introverts, they're intuitives, they build models really fast. They're not emotional. I'm a judger. I mean, I want my time. I want to get it right to the point. Ps, on the other hand, they want all the options that are possible. But we have a wonderful symbiotic relationship. And the symbiosis is they want someone who'll make a damn decision for them because every possibility is equal in their minds. For me, as a J, most Js are this way, like an INSJ is a Nazi. We're very similar. Like when I watch Nazis, I go, "Ooh, crap!" When I'm being bad, that's probably what I come off as. I'm probably acting like a Nazi. We're quiet and vicious and evil, but they're S's. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They'll just go along with loyalty. N's are not loyal to anybody. So we could never be happy with Hitler. So I use that, as weird of an analogy as that is. It's a good way. Talking about the most negative version of ourselves is the best way. What I'm telling you is put together a group of advisors that they themselves are going to complement you and they're not going to be like you. You want to hear from people who are emotional, and you want to hear from people who are cantankerous, and you want to hear from people. You want to find people that, yeah, you're not going to want to have lunch with them. That's why you're having lunch with them. You're going to have them for about an hour, and you, I promise, are going to learn things. But here's the second part. If they have businesses, they're your closest chance to getting money. If they're older, they're your closest chance to getting money. Don't go after the big whales. That's my opinion. Go after people who realistically will believe in what you're doing. They get to know you, and they'll invest a little money, or they'll find somebody to invest for you. If you ask most companies where the money came from, that's where it came from. It came from one degree of separation of people they knew. Small note, same story for dating. The odds are the person you'll end up married to knows somebody that knows you. That's the odds. I think it's like 60% still. That's a pretty high number. So same for money. So these are just hard numbers. Doesn't mean that's what's going to happen for you, but you're asking me for advice. There's my advice for you. Get advisors. Probably a small size. Keep it to about 4 or 5. Anything more than that gets confusing. And it's okay if they fight with each other. In fact, if they're old people, don't worry about that. That's just how they talk. They just fight. Everyone who's older here knows exactly what I'm talking about. So don't worry about it. They don't fight like young people. You'd think they're not going to come for lunch next time. Oh, they're right back again. So, okay. Let me see. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Good. Last one. Maintaining focus on your lines of efforts. Okay. How are you maintaining focus on your lines of efforts as someone that is neurodivergent? I should mention I am not ADHD. I'm not in any form. I'm really good with them. Almost every CEO, almost not all, but almost every CEO I've worked with has been ADHD. They actually make for better CEOs of large companies, Fortune 500s, et cetera. Self-learned programming, hardware development, and also tear things apart to learn more. Just some insights into my thinking pattern. Yeah. I do have a partner. He is a psychiatrist. He specializes in ADHD. I built a program to help people with ADHD. I learned something I did not know by working with him. I genuinely thought you could improve ADHD with diet and through exercise and other things. I thought you could improve it. The hard data is no, you cannot. I accept that now. I accept that the same way I also know that genetics probably plays a very low value in autism, way lower than everybody thinks, and definitely not because of vaccines and stuff. That's ridiculous. I'm not saying there isn't like a 1% chance, but that's not even worth talking about. Just because I can find some article doesn't mean anything. ADHD, you need to help the drugs you use to help yourself. I'll just say that. That's my best. I'm not giving you medical advice here. I'm telling you, talk to a doctor, talk to a psychiatrist, do whatever you want to try. But don't think about drugs as in they have to be used forever. Just think about them as lifesavers, meaning you're in the water, you're sinking, take the Adderall. Small dose, do it for a while you're doing the best advice I can give to anybody who takes any drugs. I'm not anti-drugs. I don't drink, I don't take drugs, etc. I don't want to mess with my mind. But I have done what I've been forced to do. When a doctor says, you must take this blood thinner, I will take that blood thinner. My first question is, how do I stop taking the blood thinner? How do I stop whatever it is you're going to do for me? And if you say, I'm going to have to do it forever, I understand that. I'm not unrealistic. But if you have ADHD, you have to learn what it feels like to not have ADHD so that you can control it yourself. The other side of that, though, is don't worry about it too much. Make sure you're getting done what you need to get done. Make sure it's not hurting you or other people. But I can tell you, we need 2 types of people on this planet. I'm going to surprise everybody here. You need the people with ADHD. They're the ones who cause amazing things to happen. I acknowledge this. I can only hope I have somebody with ADHD in my life to surprise me. And you need sociopaths. 1 sentence on this. There are so many more sociopaths around you than you realize. And it's only movies where they're evil. Most sociopaths are helpful and useful to society. You need them like we need sharks in the ocean. And most of them will not hurt you. Just don't go near them. So just saying a weird thing, but I'm just telling you, don't assume they're just as bad as everyone thinks they are. Okay, zooming through here. I have a sense that infinite games that are alternative reality games are the future. I agree. What do you see as the future of games? Yeah, I agree. Universe with universe. I will say that I had a wonderful opportunity, and I never got to make the game. And I may go to the family one day and help somebody else make it. But I got to work with Timothy Leary, and Tim had an idea for a game that was downright awesome. And he also taught me amazing things. I learned most of what I know about psychology from him. He's a much more interesting person than I think the public would ever realize. But he had an idea for a game, and yeah, alternative universes is where it's going. Absolutely agreed. And I would actually, it's kind of both. I think that hyper realism, like I would love to make it. I have no urge to make video games, as you guys know, and I'm not probably ever going to do it again. But they cross my mind, of course. I've made a lot of video games. One game I'd love to make is called One Death. And what is it? It's hyper realistic. You start the game, and if you get shot, you're dead. And it won't let you run it without getting a whole new profile going, signing in. I'll make it huge. It'll take a half hour just to get into the damn game. And you get one shot. I think that would be an amazing game. You're in a park, you're walking around, you have to get into the building, you have some, it's Die Hard. You have to go solve some problem, but if someone shoots you, you're dead. See, that's hyper realism. So that in itself, in a sense, is sort of an alternative universe of what could you even experience that. But all that, yeah, that is where games are going. You can see it already happening. And every time great big, I keep forgetting the name of it, one of the boxes, Minecraft. I do get better. I don't have Alzheimer's yet. Minecraft, that's alternative universe. All of these games, for most part, most games are one extreme or the other, and there's very little in the middle. You're either very weird or you're very hyper realistic, and that's really it. That's all there is. So I would say that those are your two things going on. If you could make a game like Tekken, again, a great little fighting game, but if they keep just making that game every single year, but just more and more real, I think it gets better and better. And more and more ridiculous, and it also gets better. I mean, ridiculous meaning, you look at a game like a Donkey Kong or anything made by the Japanese, you would swear everybody in Japan was on LSD between 1985 and 1995. Mushrooms and this and that. Yeah, they're insane. But they also just see things culturally very differently. But people want experiences they could never have normally. VR is just going to get better. AR is just going to get better. Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, that's probably like if you want to make a lot of money in a short period of time, stick with the cell phone itself as a platform, because the more of a machine there is, the more money you're going to make. You're going to get a lot of competition out there. The other place to be is to be the first game on any platform. That's also been part of my formula. 3 of my games, I will tell you, were not the best games. I was just there day one. That's it. I won because of that. Okay. LinkedIn, the Chris, got it, Holloway. Read Ong's Hat, I assume that's a book. I won't argue, somebody wants to post more details on it. Goggins has great mental game. He's insanely impressive. There's another one by, I'm horrible with people's names. I'm even horrible with the names of books. This is one thing here's an example of something I cannot do. I cannot remember the name of my favorite song. I've heard it 3,000 times. I do not know the name of the song. I can't even hum a few bars. I don't have that ability. There's something weird in my brain that doesn't, it's not an Alzheimer's thing. I've had this since I was a kid. There are things I can't remember. But what I will do is on LinkedIn, I will post another link to my top books, and I'll leave that there. That way you have it from there. But all of the books I tend to like books about habits, habit forming. Well, the books I tend to focus on are books by accidental cognitive scientists. They did the research, they had no background in it, but they suddenly realized information, and it's either in negotiating, marketing, running, not giving up. But they gained it in some way, and they went counter to everybody's advice. That's the theme. And I know like 20 books like this, and I love all of them. I read them and go, yep. I notice this very commonly. They want to talk a lot about how they didn't go to college. They don't have a degree because they've gotten over that. They realize that's not what was important. They've got something to say. They're going to say it. Yeah, it doesn't mean that the people who got the PhDs and spent the time in college aren't worth it either. No, they should work together. Just don't fight. Don't think that just because you've done a research program, you actually know what's the next thing. Someone who didn't do the research program might be the one who ends up breaking the mold. So my point is, you just can't be judgmental and all this stuff. You just have to listen to everything that's out there, get a feel for it, and keep asking people. Game theory, though, is the one topic you may notice I mentioned multiple times. And ultimately, at the end of the day, whether you're doing a video game company or anything, what you're looking for is, and you can ask everybody around you this question: what did you not expect? It's a great question to ask people. What were you, when you started doing this, what came out of left field? It doesn't matter. Don't focus on how unique it is. I can tell you stories of things that happened that probably will never happen to you. Not the point. What you should be listening for is, how did they deal with it? What really happened afterwards? That's where you find out about people. I've hired a lot of people, and I've spent over one actual man year interviewing people of my entire life. One of my 65 years on this planet has been spent just interviewing people. Horrible waste of my time in one sense. I hire very few. I hire a 1 in 10 max, maybe 1 in 20. So of the thousands of people. So I've hired several hundred people in my life. And I'm always going to ask them this question, because even if you're ready for it, if I feel like you're ready, then I'm going to ask you another question you weren't expecting. But the question is, tell me about all your worst experiences. Tell me the stories that bruised your ego. I want to hear it. If you don't have those, there's something wrong. If you can't tell it to me, there's something wrong. You know, give it a moment. And you also don't have to share it with me. You can tell me that too. I don't want to share that with you. Okay. I'll find some other questions to ask you. Don't worry, completely unrelated. I'll get to the answer I'm going to get to one way or the other. You're just hearing part of the path of how I get there. I'm very happy with my hire rate. I have fired 5 people in my life. That's a very small number. And yep, they needed firing. That was it. But for the most part, I've had to, we've had to get rid of people. We've had to change our business model. That's not firing. They feel like they're being fired. No, they're like, but you kept some and you lost us, so therefore you fired us. No, that's not true. We had to get rid of half the people, half for the best for the company, half for not. In fact, many people I've had to let go are still to this day my best friends. And I would trust them with everything I do, but I just couldn't work with them, or they couldn't work with us, or it just didn't make the most sense at that moment. Get over that too. You don't have to be friends with your employees, and vice versa. You could hate the people you work with, but love them outside of the office. All of it's fine. Anything you've learned or been told otherwise, stop believing that. It's all silly. So again, I must have a dozen great friends who have once worked with me. We cannot work together, but great people. And so one thing has nothing to do with the other, and open yourself up to that as much as you can. That's it. I'm going to shut up. Let me just check if I missed anything else that's really important. Good. Yes. I will answer in the thread I posted on LinkedIn about this thing. Feel free to keep asking questions there if you want to. If I miss something. No, if you are from the US Midwest, got it. Yes, me too. This one a little longer than I normally would go, but it's kind of a fun topic. Normally, the one I did last time, I did actually keep it to an exact hour. I won't do that next time. I won't let us go over this time. That's it. I think we're good. I'm going to kill this. Thank you guys all. I appreciate you showing up, and feel free to keep up with me on there. Like I said, I'm not selling anything. I don't even know, it could be years before I write the first book. This is fun for me as well, just to get clear on a few topics. If I can be helpful to one of you, awesome. Au revoir.